I stared at my phone like it had slapped me. There it was, in the family group chat. Not a side message, not a private joke. Right there for everyone to see. Cassandra, no one's coming to your birthday party. Grow up. I blinked once, twice. My thumb hovered over the screen. I checked the sender again, just to make sure. Yeah, it was her. My wife. My wife of 6 years. Then came the response, almost instantly. Tara, her sister, never one to miss a cheap shot. Tara, gif of a sad clown holding balloons in the rain. The little emoji reactions followed. Laughing faces. A thumbs up from her cousin Darnell. Even her Aunt Joan sent a LOL. Not one person stepped in. Not one person asked if maybe this was out of line. And Cassandra? She didn't retract it. She didn't say she was joking. She didn't even send a follow-up. Silence. I sat there, in my own living room, wearing the shirt she had bought me for Christmas last year, staring at that glowing screen like it was a window into a life I didn't belong in anymore. I typed one word. Me. Understood. I didn't argue. Didn't ask why. Didn't try to save face or call anyone out. There was no point. If someone had put a mirror in front of me right then, they wouldn't have seen a man. They'd have seen a shadow holding on to a relationship that had stopped breathing long ago. I set the phone down gently, as if the weight of it might snap my fingers. Then I walked to the kitchen table where my laptop sat, still open from earlier in the day when I was paying bills. It had been a quiet birthday already. No calls. No gifts. Just me, working remotely, listening to the dull hum of the fridge. I convinced myself people were planning something low-key. That maybe Cassandra had something planned later. Dinner. A card. Something. I should have known better. I logged into the bank account. The one we both used. The one I filled. And there it was $7,300, scheduled to process tomorrow. Cassandra's monthly medical school tuition payment. The one I'd been covering every month like clockwork. She had dreams. I respected that. She wanted to become a doctor, she said. We were building a future, she said. Except I wasn't building anything. I was just financing it. With one click, I canceled the automatic payment. The bank popped up a confirmation prompt. Are you sure? I clicked yes. Still no panic. Still no anger. Just clarity. The kind that wraps itself around you not like a fire, but like a cold wind. You don't scream. You just breathe it in and know something has changed forever. Next, I opened the car lease account. The sleek black sedan she drove wasn't in her name. It was in mine. I'd been paying it for 3 years. Cassandra called it her networking car. She needed it for clinical rotations, she said. She convinced me her car made an impression when she pulled into hospitals. Now it was time to take back the keys. I called the leasing office. The voice on the other end was cheerful. Mr. Whitaker, how can I help? I need to schedule a recovery pickup. Vehicle ID 7098, WX. It's being returned effective immediately. The driver will leave the keys at the front desk. Cancel all authorized users except me. I gave the address to Cassandra's campus housing. The woman paused only a moment, then said, Noted, sir. Anything else? I looked at my hands. No, that's all. After the call, I grabbed my wallet and went through every credit card tied to my name, hers included. She had 4. Shopping, gas, Uber rides, online orders, all of them riding on my credit. It didn't take long to shut them down. With each click, I felt something uncoil inside me. Like a cord that had been stretched for too long was finally snapping loose. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel proud. If anything, I felt embarrassed. Not because I was pulling the plug, but because I had left it running for so long. Because I had funded someone else's life while mine sat on pause. Because I believed every thank you, every just one more semester, every lie wrapped in love. I had confused loyalty with submission. That night, I sat on the couch and looked at the half-decorated cake on the coffee table. I had picked it up earlier that morning. Chocolate. The kind she used to say was too sweet for her, but perfect for me. It had a little gold topper on it. Happy 35th, Miles. I laughed once. Not loud. The kind of laugh that hurts your chest. Then I stood up, opened the fridge, and placed the cake inside. Maybe I'd eat it tomorrow. Or maybe not. Maybe it would sit there until the frosting cracked. I poured myself a glass of water. My hand didn't shake. She hadn't come home yet. She was probably with Tara, or out with friends. Maybe even Victor, her ex. I wasn't sure. And for the first time, I didn't care. I wasn't going to wait up. I wasn't going to rehearse lines in my head for when she walked in and pretended like nothing had happened. I'd done that dance too many times. Instead, I turned off the living room light, walked to the bedroom, and shut the door behind me. It wasn't revenge. It was reality. And I was finally waking up to it. I didn't become a fool overnight. That kind of thing happens slowly, like a slow leak under the sink you don't notice until the floorboards swell and smell like rot. That's what my marriage to Cassandra had become. A quiet rot. Polished on the surface, professionally dressed, articulate smiles at dinners, but the core? Hollow. When we first met, I thought I'd found someone extraordinary. She spoke with conviction, looked me in the eyes, and made plans like the future was ours to mold. I'm going to be a doctor, she told me on our third date, twirling the straw in her iced tea. But I want to build something bigger than medicine. I want to be a voice. She said we so easily back then. We'll build together. We'll travel when I'm done with residency. We'll invest in clinics. We'll make something that matters. I was working in commercial architecture then, managing mid-tier accounts. Steady money, long hours. Not glamorous, but honest. She said she admired that. She said I made her feel stable. And when she got into med school, her third try, I was the one who popped champagne. Not her parents, not her sister Tara, not even her best friend from undergrad. Me. I paid the deposit. I co-signed the housing. I cut back on vacations, sold my old car, and picked up freelance gigs to cover tuition while still managing rent and utilities. We're a team, she kept saying. But I don't think Cassandra ever wanted a teammate. I think she wanted a sponsor with a smile. At first, it was just little things. She stopped introducing me properly. We'd be out somewhere, and she'd say, "Oh, this is Miles," without the word husband anywhere near it. Once, at her school gala, someone asked if I was her brother or landlord. She laughed and didn't correct them. I let it slide. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was being sensitive, that she was just focused on school and didn't want drama. But then came the influencer life. That's what I called it in my head. First, it was study break spa days. Then yoga retreats with Tara. Then designer handbags for appearances and confidence. A better wardrobe. New phone. Trips with classmates. A spontaneous weekend in Puerto Rico that she said was a school-sponsored seminar. No pictures of lectures, though, just her and Tara drinking cocktails on a boat. I didn't question it out loud. I swallowed it. Like medicine you know is going to make you sick, but you keep taking it because the label says trust her. I became the invisible support system, the man in the shadows. While Cassandra posed on Instagram with stethoscopes and captions like future healer, forever hustling, I was in the background paying bills, budgeting groceries, skipping my own dental appointments, patching the roof myself when we got a leak because hiring someone was too expensive right now. We stopped going out together. No more movie nights. No more long walks. No more random 2 a.m. conversations about life. Just silence and the glow of her laptop screen. The last time we had a proper dinner date was nearly a year ago. I remember because it was my idea, and she'd forgotten it was our anniversary until we were already seated. She spent most of the meal texting under the table. When the waiter asked if we were celebrating something, I said, yes. 6 years. Cassandra smiled politely and said, wow, already? Already. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how long it would take for someone to forget what they begged you to believe in. But the thing that gutted me more than money, more than loneliness, more than being reduced to a footnote in her public life, was the erasure, the complete social deletion of me. She told people we lived together. She never used the word married. When I once visited her campus with takeout during her study week, one of her classmates asked if I was her uncle. She laughed, then said, "Oh, he's just helping out." I got lucky with my roommate. That was the first night I slept on the couch without saying anything. And she didn't notice. Or maybe she noticed and didn't care. I think part of me was still waiting for her to snap out of it. For her to realize what we were losing. But it never came. Every time I tried to talk, she'd sigh. Can we not do this now? You always pick the worst times to have these conversations. You don't understand how hard this is for me. I understood. What I didn't understand was how I became the villain in her story. How my sacrifices became her jokes. How my loyalty turned into something disposable. And yet, I still kept paying. Still kept believing that maybe, just maybe, once she graduated, things would settle. We'd find our rhythm again. We'd take that trip we talked about. We'd stop surviving and start living. But hope, I've learned, can be dangerous. especially when it's unrequited. I started keeping a journal. Not one of those leather-bound poetic types. Just a digital note on my phone called Proof of Self. I wrote down things she said, how they made me feel, the dates I paid tuition, the moments I caught her lying. I didn't do it to expose her. I did it to remind myself I wasn't crazy. Because gaslighting doesn't always come with shouting matches. Sometimes it comes with silence, with passive shrugs, with the slow deletion of your worth until you forget what you ever brought to the table. People think betrayal is loud, a scandal, a shouting match, a tearful confession. But sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's in the way they stop saying thank you, in the way they roll their eyes when you walk in the way they stop calling you babe and start calling you you. I was funding a fantasy, but it wasn't mine. And somewhere deep down, I think I knew it. I just didn't want to admit it. Because once you admit the truth, you have to do something about it. And at the time, I didn't think I had the strength. It was the Thanksgiving I wasn't supposed to see. Looking back, that day didn't just leave a scar, it opened a door I had spent too long pretending wasn't there. It showed me, clear as sunlight on glass, that I had already been written out of her story. I just hadn't caught up with the script. The week before, Cassandra had mentioned she'd be spending Thanksgiving with family, and that it'd just be a small thing. I'd assumed we were going together. We always did. Sure, it was usually at her mother's house or Tara's place, but still family. I didn't question it. I even offered to pick up a bottle of wine and flowers. She said she had it covered. Then on the day itself, around 2 p.m., I realized I hadn't heard a word from her. No texts, no calls, nothing. The house was quiet. Her toothbrush was gone from the holder, and so was the good perfume she only wore on nights she wanted to impress someone. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I didn't look angry, just disappointed and tired. I brushed my hair, pulled on a shirt, grabbed the wine I had bought anyway, and drove to Tara's house. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Part of me knew, deep down, that I wasn't supposed to be there. But another part still hoped. That was my problem. Hope. The driveway was full. BMWs, a Lexus SUV, even a Tesla parked on the lawn like a showroom. I walked in through the side gate, where I could already hear music and laughter coming from the back patio. Voices, loud and giddy. Someone clinking a glass. When I stepped inside the house, the air smelled like cinnamon, turkey, and fake forgiveness. Everything was perfectly decorated. Gold leaves along the mantel, warm lights around the doorways. A long table stretched across the dining room, and that's when I saw her. Cassandra, hair straightened, makeup flawless, laughing with a glass of wine in hand like she didn't have a husband standing less than 20 feet away. She didn't notice me at first. She was too busy introducing someone. "This is Victor," she said to a group of her classmates. A close family friend. Victor Bray. I'd seen him once before. Years ago. A photo, back when we were dating. She told me he was ancient history. A mistake. Just a fling. He didn't look like ancient history that night. He looked like the guest of honor. He carved the turkey. He poured the wine. He stood at the head of the table while Cassandra sat beside him, her hand brushing his arm more than once. When she finally saw me, her face froze. Just for a second. Then she tilted her head and smiled like I was a neighbor who'd wandered in by accident. "Miles," she said, her voice too sweet. "You didn't tell me you were coming." "I brought wine," I said, holding it up. "Oh, thank you," she replied, already turning away. "There's space at the end of the kids' table." She pointed, and I followed her finger to a side table by the hallway, with 3 folding chairs and a plastic tablecloth. A younger cousin sat there playing on a tablet. That was my seat. I didn't argue. I didn't demand a spot at the main table. I walked over, pulled out a chair, and sat. I sipped the cheap wine she handed me and watched Victor laugh with her like they were already in the photo albums. Then Tara raised her glass for a toast. "To ambition," she said, her words slow and deliberate. "To power. And to real partners who lift us up." The room laughed. Cassandra clinked her glass with Victor's. My chest felt tight, but my face stayed calm. I was done playing emotions on my sleeve. I didn't belong here, and they were making sure I knew it. After dinner, I helped clear the dishes. No one asked me to. It's just what I did. Old habit. I stacked the plates. I rinsed the cutlery. In the kitchen, I saw the catering receipt taped to the fridge, over $1,000. I recognized the charge. It had come from our joint account. She hadn't mentioned that. When I got home, I opened a new folder on my laptop. I titled it Observations. In it, I started to store copies of receipts, screenshots, emails. I wasn't planning anything yet. I just needed to preserve reality before it was twisted into gaslight. People think betrayal is one huge moment. A cheating scandal, a throne ring, a yelling match in a parking lot. But that's not how it was for me. It was slow. It was quiet. It was a Thanksgiving where I was the only one who didn't know I wasn't supposed to be there. That night, I lay in bed listening to Cassandra come home hours later. I pretended to be asleep. She didn't say a word, not even a whisper of explanation. She just plugged in her phone, got under the covers, and turned away from me. The worst part wasn't the silence. It was realizing I had gotten used to it. My 35th birthday was supposed to be quiet. Nothing over the top, just dinner, a few friends, maybe a card if Cassandra remembered. I didn't need a party. I didn't expect balloons or confetti or speeches. I just wanted acknowledgement, presence, something real. Instead, I got silence. Well, not entirely. I got one thing, one message, 13 words, a sucker punch disguised as a group text. No one's coming to your birthday party. Grow up. That came from Cassandra. In the family group chat. No warning. No follow-up. Just that. Then her sister Tara, always quick to jump in with backup vocals, dropped a clown gif. The one with sad eyes and a single balloon, walking in the rain. No one called to check on me. No one asked if it was a joke. No one said, "Hey, Miles, happy birthday anyway." It was intentional. A public dressing down. A digital exile. The kind of thing that tells you, you're not just forgotten, you're being erased. And that was the moment the weight finally lifted. Not the hurt that stayed, but the illusion, the lie I had kept feeding myself that maybe she just needed time, or that I just had to be more patient, or that one day she'd remember who we used to be. That illusion shattered. And in the quiet that followed, something new took its place. Resolve. I had planned a dinner that night. Just a small one. A few close friends from my side. A cozy restaurant I'd booked 2 weeks in advance. I'd called ahead to confirm the reservation and even selected the wine for the table. I had texted Cassandra the time and location. She'd read it. No reply, but I still showed up. I walked into the restaurant at 7:02 p.m. The host smiled and led me to a table set for 8. A candle flickered at the center. Glasses glimmered. The menu had Happy 35th, Mr. Whitaker printed on the top in gold script. I sat, waited, and waited. After 20 minutes, the host came by gently. "Would you like to wait a little longer, sir?" I looked up at him, smiled. "No," I said. "I think I've waited long enough." I tipped him double, thanked him for setting the table so nicely, and then I left. That walk back to my car was the loneliest 5 minutes I've lived in a long time. But it was also the most honest. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even listen to music. I just let the silence settle and asked myself the hardest question I'd avoided for years. How much more of yourself are you going to trade in for someone who keeps offering you less? When I got back, the house was dark. Cassandra wasn't home. Again, no surprise. Her med school hours were unpredictable, or so she claimed. I didn't care where she was. Not anymore. Not after that. I walked into my home office, opened my laptop, and started a new folder. I named it one word. Severance. Inside it, I began organizing everything I'd been quietly collecting. Screenshots of her messages with Victor, the ones I wasn't supposed to see. Bank transfers from our joint account to her emergency fund that never seemed to shrink. Emails to her academic advisor where she referred to me not as her husband, but her cohabitant. Photos from that Thanksgiving dinner where she sat beside her ex like I didn't exist. I pulled in voice memos, 2 little snippets I'd recorded when I overheard her talking to her sister or classmates on speakerphone. Things like, "He's not a husband. He's an investor with emotions, and honestly, once this degree is done, I'm done too." All of it. Compiled. Labeled. Timestamped. It didn't feel vengeful. It felt necessary. People like Cassandra build walls with smiles. They gaslight you so gently that you start to believe the room is actually spinning because you're dizzy, not because they're shaking the floor. So I built my own version of truth, brick by brick. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. My feet hit the floor with a calm I hadn't felt in years. I brewed coffee, opened the banking app, and canceled the monthly tuition payment, $7,300, gone with one click. She wouldn't even notice until the school sent her the warning. Then I called the lease service and reclaimed The credit cards followed next. Cut. Closed. All tied to me. All silent now. By noon, the world looked the same, but I wasn't. I walked into the bedroom, took one last look at her side of the closet, full of clothes I'd paid for, shoes from brands she used to pronounce wrong, perfume bottles that cost more than our couch. And I realized something important. She had never planned to stay. She built a launchpad using my patience. And now, with her degree almost finished, she had begun the countdown, one cruel text at a time. But the mistake she made? She thought I'd wait for the rocket to leave before I noticed the smoke. She thought I'd stand there waving goodbye, smiling like a fool as she soared into a future I financed. But this time, I was walking away from the launch pad. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel small. I felt free. 2 weeks after the group chat, Cassandra sent me a message that simply read, "Let's talk like adults. Dinner at Mom's. No drama. Tara and I just want to clear the air." I stared at the message for a long moment. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I understood it too well. This wasn't an apology. It wasn't peace. It was control, dressed in politeness. She still believed I could be managed, manipulated, that I would show up like a whipped dog, ready to be scolded for biting the hand that fed it. But I replied, sure, because this time, I wasn't coming to beg. I was coming to bury the illusion once and for all. That afternoon, I packed a small duffel bag. Inside it, I placed a black folder with labeled dividers, a flash drive, a printed document from our joint account, and a single sheet of housing paperwork I'd accidentally come across a few weeks ago. I slid in a pair of old receipts, a screenshot or two, and zipped it shut. I didn't need a crowd. I didn't need a speech. I needed truth. When I arrived at Cassandra's mother's house, the table was already set. Fancy napkins, wine glasses, scented candles. Tara stood near the kitchen with a smug smirk like she already knew how this night would go. Their mother, Gloria, gave me a tight smile as I walked in. The same smile she wore at our wedding, polished, controlled, and sincere. Cassandra greeted me with a kiss to the cheek, the kind you'd give a cousin at a funeral. "Thanks for coming," she said. She was wearing pearls. Not the ones I bought her, though. These were new, subtle, expensive. I wondered who gave them to her. We sat down. I took the seat closest to the end. They had me flanked, Tara on my left, Cassandra on my right, Gloria directly across. "Let's just address the elephant in the room," Tara began. She never wasted time. "Your reaction to Cass's message was extreme. Cutting off her tuition? Repossessing the car? Miles, that was childish." I nodded, letting the words settle. I didn't respond. Not yet. Cassandra cleared her throat. "You embarrassed me, Miles. You didn't need to make a scene. We could have talked." "I didn't make a scene," I said quietly. "I took responsibility for my finances." "You blindsided me," she snapped. "You posted a clown gif with your sister in a group chat on my birthday," I said calmly. "I suppose we have different definitions of blindside." Her mother raised a hand like she was a judge presiding over petty court. "Enough. You're both adults. This marriage can still be saved. But you have to stop acting like a victim, Miles. Cassandra is building something important. A career in medicine. You jeopardized it with your tantrum." I let the silence stretch. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, and placed it on the table. "What's this?" Cassandra asked. I slid it over. Proof. Of what? Of the role I was playing. Of how long I played it. And how little it meant to you. Cassandra rolled her eyes. "Seriously? You brought receipts?" Tara laughed. "This is so dramatic." I opened the folder and pulled out a printed transcript from a voicemail I'd saved. One where Cassandra was on speakerphone with 2 classmates. She was laughing. "He's so boring. But useful. Pays everything on time. I call him my investor husband. It's like having a human scholarship." I didn't speak. I just placed the printed transcript on the table. Cassandra's face went pale. That was taken out of context. I held up a USB drive. "There's audio." Gloria shifted in her chair. "You recorded her?" I nodded. After a while, I needed to remind myself I wasn't crazy. Tara stood up. "This is pathetic. This is just a man who can't handle a strong woman." I opened to the next section. Text messages between Cassandra and Victor. The usual hearts, winks, and plans. But one line stood out. I highlighted it in yellow. "Once the degree is mine, I'll be free. He'll think he helped me become. But he was just my grant." Cassandra reached out, tried to grab the paper. I pulled it back. Then I laid out the final piece, a printout of her student housing request form from the school's online portal, which she left open on the shared iPad once. The section labeled Future Cohabitant was filled in. Victor Bray. Same last name as mine, but not family. Cassandra stood up now. You went through my things? No, I said. You left them in plain sight. You just assumed I'd never open my eyes. The room fell quiet. Tara broke the silence with a laugh. So what? You want credit for being a walking wallet? No, I said. I want acknowledgement. But failing that, I'll settle for closure. Cassandra's face hardened. You think this makes you look smart? All this proves is that you were bitter enough to build a case. I stood up. No. What this proves is that I stopped being stupid enough to ignore it. I zipped the folder, slid it back into my bag, and looked at all three women. I'm not angry. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I finally learned the difference between love and leverage. Tara sneered. So you're leaving? I shook my head. I already left. I just came back to hand over the last bill. And with that, I walked out. No yelling. No door slammed. No tears. Just truth. And freedom. I wasn't expecting the doorbell. Not that night. Not after the dinner. Not after I laid everything bare at the table like a quiet storm and walked out without looking back. But when it rang, 3 sharp buzzes, back to back like someone trying to break the silence, I already knew who it would be. I opened the door slowly, and there he stood. Leo Stanton. I hadn't seen him in almost a year. Last time we'd spoken was at a charity event Cassandra dragged me to. He and Cassandra had exchanged a look I hadn't fully understood back then. One of those glances that carry too much history, too much silence behind the eyes. Shortly after that, Leo ghosted. No calls. No texts. He stopped showing up to group gatherings and even unfollowed Cassandra on social media. At the time, I thought maybe they'd had a falling out. Or maybe she said something that made him uncomfortable. I didn't ask. Honestly, I was too tired back then to chase one more person in her circle. Now he was at my door, holding a small brown envelope. You look like hell, he said. I cracked a faint smile. You always were honest. He shrugged. You let me in? I stepped aside. We sat at the kitchen table. Same spot where I used to review the monthly tuition statements. The irony wasn't lost on me. I watched what happened at that dinner, Leo said, placing the envelope between us. I parked up the street, waited for the right time. I raised an eyebrow. You knew I'd be there? He nodded. Cassandra told me. She said it was going to be a reality check dinner. Figured I should come see what kind of reality we were dealing with. And what's in the envelope? He pushed it toward me. Inside were printed screenshots, bank transfers, chat logs, a photo of Cassandra and Victor at a hotel lounge dated 8 months ago, a copy of an online form from a private medical research grant she'd applied for, listing Leo as her co-project supervisor. I blinked. You were helping her? Not the way you think, he said. She used my name without asking. Said it would look good on the form. I found out a month later when the foundation emailed me a thank you note for supporting her ethics proposal. That's when I cut ties. I stared at the papers. Why come now? Because people like Cassandra don't stop until someone holds up a mirror. He leaned back. I knew you wouldn't believe it if I just told you. You needed to see it, feel it, accept it for yourself. My stomach tightened. So you knew she was cheating? I knew she was lying. About more than just Victor. About the whole, I'm a hard-working woman building my dream performance. You weren't her partner. You were her prop. That hit harder than I expected. Not because it was new, but because it was finally spoken out loud. I poured us each a glass of water. Leo tapped the rim of his, thoughtful. I also came because there's one more thing. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then handed it to me. A voice memo. I pressed play. Tara's voice crackled through the speaker. I don't even feel bad. He's so soft. Leo. We used his name for my new credit card. He didn't even notice. Cassandra says I should take out another one before he grows a spine. I froze. Leo took the phone back and said quietly, that's identity fraud, Miles. I've already sent the original to my lawyer, in case you want to file. I stared at the table for a long moment. Everything I thought I knew about these people was unraveling in front of me. Not just betrayal, but theft. Not just manipulation, but premeditated erasure. And I had smiled through it, paid through it, lived through it. Like some extra's character in a drama they were starring in. Leo leaned forward. This isn't just about your marriage anymore. It's about your name, your credit, your identity. I nodded slowly. And then I did something that surprised even me. I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because it finally all made sense. This wasn't a tragedy. It was an awakening. Later that week, I filed the credit fraud report. Leo helped me submit the paperwork. We met with a financial advisor to lock down my accounts, freeze access, and rebuild what had been compromised. I updated passwords, cut off all links to joint accounts, called the bank to reverse any remaining open authorizations. Then Leo handed me one last thing, a sealed envelope. A cease and desist, he said, drafted by my lawyer, against Cassandra and Tara, for misusing my name and for slander. It won't fix everything, but it starts the clock. I stared at the envelope. You think it'll stop them? He shook his head. No. But it lets them know they're not untouchable anymore. That night, I slept better than I had in months, because I wasn't alone anymore. And the next time I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a shadow. I saw a man reclaiming his shape. I never thought I'd become the kind of man who posted his pain online. For most of my life, I believed dignity meant silence. That handling things like a man meant swallowing it whole and never letting the world see you bleed. But sometimes silence isn't noble. Sometimes it's just a cover, a trap disguised as grace. And I was done bleeding behind closed doors while they smiled in public, shaping a narrative where I was the fool and they were the architects of success. So I uploaded it all. I created a private blog, password protected at first. No names in the URL. Just a plain white background and a title in black text. When love is alone with interest. I started with the timeline. Bullet points. Receipts. Copies of financial records, tuition payments, credit card breakdowns. Then the screenshots. Text messages. Voice clips. No editing, no commentary, just evidence. I didn't need to twist anything. The truth was already twisted enough on its own. I uploaded the transcript of the Thanksgiving dinner. The recording where Tara called me a soft little wallet. The housing document where Cassandra listed Victor as her intended roommate. And finally, the voice note, her voice, clear as glass, laughing with classmates. He's basically my sponsor. My emotional ATM. When I graduate, I'll cash him out. It hurt to hear again. Even though I'd already played it in my head 100 times, hearing it out loud still burned. But it had to be done. At the bottom of the page, I left a single sentence. I gave everything. And they laughed. Then I went to bed. I didn't promote it. Didn't blast it across social media or drop the link in the family chat like some kind of revenge fantasy. That wasn't the point. This wasn't a campaign. It was a ledger. A record for anyone who ever wondered what happened to Miles Whitaker. The next day, something unexpected happened. It spread. First, it was just a few people. Mutual friends who still followed me quietly even after Cassandra had painted me as difficult or emotionally draining. Then old colleagues, classmates from her program, and even a few distant relatives of hers. The kind who never picked sides at weddings but always knew when something smelled off. People started sharing it. Not in a loud, viral way. In a quiet, undeniable one. Like whispers echoing down hallways. By the end of the first 24 hours, it had 300 views. By the next evening, over 2,000. Comments started trickling in. Private messages. Some from women saying, I lived this too. Thank you for saying it out loud. Others from men whispering, I thought I was crazy until I read this. One message came from someone I'd never met. A professor from Cassandra's med school. Mr. Whitaker, I'd like to speak with you, confidentially. There are ethical concerns raised in your documentation that our board is obligated to review. You are not in trouble. We are simply listening. I didn't reply. Not right away. I just stared at the message, stunned. It hadn't occurred to me that the truth might not just stir people, it might shake foundations. Tara posted a cryptic Instagram story. Some people can't move on without an audience. Cassandra called me. 17 times. All ignored. Then came the email. Please take it down. This is hurting my reputation. I'll pay you back, okay? Just stop embarrassing me. I didn't respond to that either. Instead, I posted one more update to the blog. Just 2 lines. You turned our marriage into a scholarship. Now pay your own tuition. After that, I disabled comments. Not to silence people, but because I didn't need a chorus. The performance was over. The curtain had dropped. The final act belonged to me. I walked through the rest of the week like I was floating. Not with pride, but with relief. Like my skin finally fit again. Like I could walk into a room without shrinking. I passed Victor in the street once. Pure accident. He saw me and looked down fast, pretending to tie his shoe. I just kept walking. Cassandra sent one last message that week. You've ruined me. No apology. No ownership. Just blame. I deleted it. Because I hadn't ruined her. I had revealed her. And for once, that was enough. It's strange how quickly a house stops feeling like home once the illusion dies. Our condo had once been my sanctuary. I painted the walls myself the year we moved in, soft grays and calming whites, colors Cassandra had picked from a Pinterest board she never touched again. I installed the lighting, upgraded the kitchen, built a small corner office out of a closet so she could study in peace. Now, it all felt like a museum of a marriage that never really existed. So I left, not in some dramatic escape. I didn't slam doors or pack in a fury. I moved out with the same quiet precision I'd applied to everything else, methodical, respectful, final. The truth was, I'd already prepared for this. 6 months ago, I transferred ownership of the condo into a legal trust under my name. Cassandra hadn't noticed. She wasn't involved in the paperwork. She didn't ask questions when I said we needed to simplify our assets for tax purposes. She signed where I told her to. So when she tried to file a complaint with the building management, demanding I be removed for abandoning her during finals, they politely redirected her to the title records. And there it was, in black and white. I owned it. She didn't. I didn't evict her. I didn't change the locks. I just left. Took what was mine. Not the couch, not the dishes. Just my clothes, my tools, my documents. My freedom. I found a new place downtown. Smaller. More modern. 1 bedroom, high ceilings, wide windows. It smelled like new paint and second chances. I paid the deposit up front. No co-signers. No shared key. I didn't furnish it with the old. I didn't drag the ghosts with me. I started fresh. And I hung one frame above my desk, a printed copy of the blog post that started it all. When love is alone with interest. It was more than closure. It was a reminder that silence isn't peace, that boundaries are a form of love, and that sometimes the only way to rebuild is to burn the blueprint you used before. The blog kept growing, even after I stopped updating it. Emails poured in, not from haters or trolls, but from survivors. From people stuck in relationships where they were nothing more than emotional scaffolding. From people who had been mocked, manipulated, erased. One woman wrote, "Reading your story felt like someone turned on the lights in a room I didn't know I was sleeping in." That line stayed with me. It made me think, maybe I could do more. I'd always had a knack for structure. Not just in architecture, but in people, systems, connections. I liked making things make sense. That's what Cassandra used to say before she stopped saying anything kind at all. So I started a consulting firm. I called it Whitaker Consulting, simple, quiet, but rooted in something strong. I wasn't a therapist. I wasn't a lawyer. But I was someone who understood the invisible kind of damage. The slow erosion of worth. The price of silence. My first offer was a digital toolkit. When support becomes a sentence. It was free. A downloadable guide for people stuck in financial manipulation. How to track your contributions, protect your accounts, spot the red flags in your own narrative before someone convinces you they're figments of your imagination. It went viral. Quietly. Like my blog. Within 3 weeks, I had 40 new clients. Not customers, clients. People looking for clarity. Men and women. Students and retirees. Some were stuck. Some were scarred. Some were finally ready to start over. And I knew exactly what that felt like. I spent my days helping others see their own value again. I spent my nights reading stories that mirrored mine. I didn't fix people. That wasn't my job. I just helped them remember what they'd buried to survive. For the first time in years, I woke up without dread. Without that gnawing sense of inadequacy. Without the pressure to be enough for someone who only saw me as useful. Leo visited the office once. Looked around at the minimalist decor, clean lines, warm woods, no clutter. He smiled and said, "This feels like you." That meant something. Because for so long, nothing in my life had felt like me. Cassandra tried to reach me again. This time through a third party. A mutual friend who sent a message saying she was struggling, that she had fallen behind on tuition, that she was emotionally devastated by the fallout. I didn't respond. Because she wasn't reaching out to make peace. She was reaching out for another deposit. That's the thing about people who use others like ladders. They don't recognize the damage until the floor disappears. And I had stopped being the floor. I had become something else. Someone else. Because that version of me deserved to be remembered, not erased. He was hopeful, brave, generous. He just didn't know yet that hope can't grow in someone else's shadow. Now, when I sat at my new desk, sipping coffee from a plain ceramic mug with no initials on it, I didn't feel bitter. I felt free. And that was more than enough. The email came on a Monday morning, buried between a calendar invite and a newsletter from a tech magazine I'd forgotten to unsubscribe from. The subject line, urgent, please read. It was from Cassandra. I paused, thumb hovering over the mouse. My instinct was to delete it, but something made me click. Inside was a photo, blurry, but clear enough. A notice from her university's financial department. Final warning, tuition overdue. The total balance was just shy of $11,000. Beneath the photo was one line. They might suspend me. I hope you're proud. That was it. No greeting. No context. No apology. Just blame. Just pressure. Just Cassandra, still playing the role she had perfected, victim in her own story, star of a tragedy she had authored with my ink and my money. I closed the message. For a long time, I just sat there, hands folded, back straight, breathing slow. There was a time that message would have ruined my day, sent me into a spiral of guilt, self-doubt, maybe even action. I would have pulled out the credit card, called the registrar, fixed it for her. But I wasn't that man anymore. This wasn't love. It was leverage. And I had already paid the ransom. So I opened my desktop folder labeled receipts. Inside was a neatly compiled PDF. Every tuition payment I had made since the day she was accepted. Month by month. Date. Amount. Method of payment. Each line marked with a small note. Paid by M. Whitaker. It added up to $162,450. I hit reply. Attached the PDF. Wrote one sentence. You had your chance. This was a loan, not a lifetime sentence. Then I clicked send. There was no satisfaction in it. No glee. It was like closing a door that had been banging in the wind for too long. Just peace. Later that day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Tara. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Miles speaking. You're unbelievable, she said, without so much as a hello. Good morning to you too, Tara. I don't know what Cassandra ever saw in you, she hissed. You're cold. You're calculated. You're punishing her over a joke. It was a birthday joke, Miles. I almost laughed. A birthday joke seen by 12 people, 2 gifts, and 1 group-wide humiliation. But sure, let's call it comedy. You're ruining her future. She's drowning. And you're just sitting there, doing nothing. I'm doing something, I said calmly. I'm refusing to drown with her. Tara went silent for a beat. Then she shifted gears. You should know we're consulting a lawyer. Defamation. Invasion of privacy. You had no right to post those recordings. I took a breath. Tell your lawyer to check Section 632 of the state code. One-party consent for audio recordings. And tell him to explain how it's defamation if it's all true. More silence. You're not a good man, Miles. No, I said. I'm just not your doormat anymore. Click. I stared at the phone for a moment before placing it face down on the table. Later that evening, I went for a walk. The sky was bruised with the soft colors of dusk, and the air had that crisp edge that meant fall was finally here for real. I walked past a bookstore where I used to pick up reference guides for Cassandra's classes. She'd never read them, but she liked how they looked in her study photos. I kept walking. At a small park bench tucked behind a row of trees, I sat down and watched as kids raced around a jungle gym. A woman nearby laughed as her daughter tugged at her scarf. It was the kind of scene I used to imagine for myself. A future with family, weekends in the park, joy that didn't come with strings. That's when my phone buzzed again. Another message. From Cassandra. I didn't want to read it, but I did. You'd be a terrible father. Cold. Unloving. Empty. Just like your own dad. She knew exactly where to aim. It wasn't random. She'd thrown that stone with precision. My relationship with my father had always been distant, strained. He was a quiet man, colder than the winters he shoveled through without complaint. We rarely spoke. When I got married, he sent a card, not a call. When I paid off his mortgage after Mom passed, he didn't even say thank you. And still, part of me had always feared I'd become him. That message was designed to awaken that fear. But it didn't. It did something else. It reminded me that love is not measured by sacrifice alone. I had given everything: time, money, loyalty, trust. And still, I was being told I wasn't enough. That I never had been. But the difference now? I didn't believe it. I wasn't empty. I was full of boundaries, of lessons, of strength earned the hard way. So I blocked her, not in anger, in peace. Because healing doesn't always come with forgiveness. Sometimes it comes with silence. And I had finally reclaimed mine. 1 year later, I didn't throw a birthday party. I hosted something better. I called it a gathering, a small event in a quiet space I rented downtown. No loud music, no flashy decorations, no overcompensating. Just warm lighting, clean tables, good food, and people who showed up not because they had to, but because they wanted to. I didn't send out traditional invitations. I sent a message simple and clear. Come if you've ever been made to feel like a burden for how deeply you love. This table is for you. And they came. Friends I hadn't seen in years. Clients turned friends who had found their voices through our work together. A few familiar faces who had once stayed silent during my unraveling, now showing up with open hearts and quiet apologies. Leo was the first to arrive, holding a bottle of red wine and a smirk. You still allergic to loud toasts? He asked. Only the fake ones, I smiled, clinking his glass. The venue had high ceilings and large windows. A fireplace crackled in the corner, more for comfort than heat. I wore a black sweater and jeans, nothing fancy. Just me. At the far end of the room, there was a small framed sign that read, "We don't rebuild what broke you. We build what frees you." That had become the motto of Whitaker Consulting, and I meant every word of it. In the last year, the work had grown beyond anything I imagined. I wasn't just coaching anymore. I was speaking, hosting private workshops, designing tools for people walking the tightrope of emotionally manipulative partnerships. We had clients across the country, some international. People who said, "Your story helped me understand mine." And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel like I was holding someone else's life together. I was finally living mine. After the food, I stood in front of the room, not to perform, not to explain, but to share. A short speech. No notes. Last year, I was told no one was coming to my birthday. And they didn't. Not one person. Not one call. That message stayed with me longer than I thought it would. A few heads nodded. But what stayed with me even more was what I said back. Just one word. Understood. And I did. I understood the roles people expected me to play. The silence they needed me to keep. The shape I was supposed to shrink into. I understood it all. And then I let it go. I paused, breathing it in. This year, I didn't send invitations. I sent boundaries. And if you're here tonight, it's because you saw them and chose to knock anyway. For that, thank you. Applause, warm and human. Afterward, a young woman I'd worked with approached me. She was in her 20s, recently divorced, once convinced she was the reason everything had gone wrong. "You made me feel like I wasn't crazy," she said. "You didn't fix me. You just reminded me that I was never broken." That almost brought tears. Almost. I stood outside the venue after everyone left, letting the night air cool my face. The city hummed quietly around me. Cars passed. Streetlights blinked. But inside me? Stillness. For years, I had chased peace in someone else's approval. I had bent over backward hoping to be seen, loved, respected. And the harder I bent, the easier it was for them to step over me. No more. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need Cassandra to fall apart, or Tara to admit anything, or even for the world to pick sides. I had chosen mine. I walked back to my apartment. My home. My space. Inside, the walls were lined with books and art I actually liked. A small corner was set up as a recording studio for my video lessons. My desk faced a window, where the sun poured in each morning like a fresh beginning. And on the shelf above that desk sat a steel plaque. It wasn't big, just enough. It read, "Guess who's not turning 12 again?" A private joke. A reminder of the clown gif. The humiliation. The birthday that broke something open. Now, it made me smile. Because they were right. I wasn't turning 12 again. I had finally grown up. Not into the cold, unloving man they tried to paint me as, but into someone real. Someone whole. Someone who didn't beg to be chosen. Because now, finally, I chose me. I still remember the exact moment my stomach dropped. It was a quiet Thursday evening. Nothing dramatic. No storm clouds outside. Just the clinking of silverware and the hum of the kitchen fan. I was folding napkins at the dinner table, helping my wife Adeline get ready for what I believed was her brother Mason's wedding the next day. I had ironed my shirt earlier that afternoon. Even polished the old shoes I only wear to events that require smiling through small talk. "You excited for tomorrow?" I asked, gently tucking a napkin into a rose shape. Adeline blinked, almost like she didn't understand what I was talking about. Then she tilted her head slightly, narrowed her eyes at me as if I had just suggested the sky was green, and replied in the flattest voice I've ever heard from her. It was last week. At first, I thought she was joking. I waited for the smirk, the sarcastic jab she always followed her pranks with. But nothing came. She reached for her phone, tapped her screen a few times, and handed it to me without a word. There it was. Proof. Mason and his bride, Lucy, standing under a wooden arch decorated with white roses and soft string lights. Guests gathered by the lake, raising glasses. There was Mason's best man, her cousin Jace, wiping tears from his eyes. The photographer had done a great job capturing everything. And then there was Adeline, my wife, in a deep emerald dress I'd never seen before. Hair curled, makeup perfect, smiling like she belonged there. Because she did. Everyone did. Except me. I kept flipping through the pictures, searching for a glimpse of myself. Maybe a corner of my jacket in the background. Maybe I'd forgotten I was there. Maybe they were testing me for some reason I didn't understand. But I wasn't in a single one. I set the phone down slowly. My throat felt dry. I looked at her, still waiting for something, an apology, an explanation, anything human. She just went back to folding napkins, humming like nothing happened. From the couch, her sister Mira called out, "Didn't we tell you?" She said it casually, like someone mentioning the weather. I turned my head and found her scrolling through her own phone, legs crossed, sipping from a glass of red wine like we were all just sitting through another boring commercial break. Their mother Delphine was beside her. She laughed, a full-bodied, deep laugh that made her shoulders shake. "Oh goodness, I could have sworn we told you," she wheezed, wiping her eyes with a tissue she pulled from her sleeve. No one said sorry. No one even looked concerned. They acted like I was the forgetful one, like it was my fault for not magically appearing at a wedding I was never told about. I stood there, napkin in hand, feeling like the floor had dropped from under me. Everything else faded, the hum of the fan, the clink of the wine glass, even the rising tension in my jaw. It was just me and the realization that I had become a stranger in my own house. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. And it hit loud and clear. I didn't matter to them. Not enough to be told. Not enough to be missed. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. I just quietly picked up the plates from the table and started placing them in the sink. My hands moved automatically, scrubbing bits of rice and sauce while my mind stayed stuck on that photo, Adeline, smiling beside her brother like nothing in the world could make that moment better. Except maybe my absence. She could have told me. I'd been asking about the wedding for weeks, when it was, what the dress code would be, if I should get a gift for Mason. She always brushed it off, said the plans kept changing, said they were working things out. Lies. All of it. That night, I lay beside her in bed, our backs not touching. She scrolled through her phone until she fell asleep. Meanwhile, I stared at the ceiling, numb. Not sad. Not even angry. Just empty. I replayed the last few months in my mind. How often her family made plans without me. How I was left out of group texts. How they scheduled dinners that must have slipped their minds when I asked. How Mira once made a joke about me being the plus one that got subtracted. How I laughed. I actually laughed. Now I knew better. This wasn't carelessness. It was deliberate. I had been erased. What stung most wasn't even the betrayal. It was the calmness with which they did it. Like it was routine. Like they had done it before. Like I was the only one who hadn't caught on. In the dark, I reached for my phone. I opened the photo again. That emerald dress. That lakeside glow. Adeline smiling without me. I placed the phone face down on the nightstand. And that's when something in me clicked. Not in a loud, vengeful way, but in a cold, quiet whisper deep in my chest. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought I'd keep folding napkins. They had no idea. That night, sleep didn't visit me. Not even a hint of it. I lay still beside Adeline, who had fallen asleep without a shred of guilt on her face. Her breathing was soft and even, like someone who had nothing to worry about in the world. Meanwhile, I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind circling the same question again and again. How long have I been invisible in this family? I turned to my side, quietly picked up my phone, and opened the gallery where I had saved the wedding photos from her screen. I zoomed in on each one, examining faces, body language, laughter. Everyone looked happy. Posed. Included. Except me. I wasn't there, not in any shot. not in any corner of a reflection, not in a stray shadow. Because I wasn't invited. Because they had made sure I wasn't supposed to be. They didn't forget. They excluded. And it wasn't just about missing the wedding. That was just the surface. This ran deeper. Much deeper. I remembered the weeks leading up to that date, how I had helped Mason fix his new house. He'd called me about a cracked pipe under the guest bathroom, and I had called in my usual plumber. When the guy quoted him too high, I offered to cover part of it, quietly, no big scene. I just wired the difference straight to the company. Then there was the fencing issue, the kitchen tiling, the rewiring of the faulty breaker panel. I had been there every step of the way. I had done it all because family helps family. Or so I thought. Now I realized what I had really been. Useful. Not loved. Not included. Just useful. Like an app they open when needed and close the second it's done. As Adeline shifted beside me, I studied her silhouette in the dark. She looked peaceful, like someone who had just hosted a successful event. I wondered if she had smiled while they toasted her brother. I wondered if she had made a speech. Did she mention me? Did she lie and say I was away on business? Or worse, did no one ask about me at all? It made my stomach turn. By 5 a.m., I was up. I moved around the house like a ghost, quiet, invisible, familiar. I made coffee, skipped breakfast, sat at the dining table where we had once shared laughs and plans, and just stared at the empty seat across from me. Then I pulled out my laptop. It wasn't out of revenge, not yet. It was out of clarity. Cold, necessary clarity. I opened my spreadsheets. Line by line, I went through every transaction over the past 2 years. Tens of thousands had gone to Mason's renovation. More to Delphine's house repairs. A few chunks here and there toward Myra's salon launch, though that business barely lasted 3 months before folding, and no one ever mentioned returning what I gave. I never asked. I never kept score. Until now. Because now it mattered. I looked at the pattern, and a terrible realization hit me. I was more involved in their financial life than their emotional one. I wasn't family. I was infrastructure. That morning, Adeline wandered in around 7, wrapped in her robe, yawning and scratching her head. She smiled when she saw me. "Morning," she said, planting a light kiss on my cheek like nothing had happened. "Morning," I replied, my voice so calm it surprised even me. She poured herself coffee and sat opposite me. Then she started scrolling through her phone. I watched her for a moment, trying to picture what it felt like to live without consequence. To break someone's trust and then sit beside them like nothing happened. That took a kind of audacity I couldn't understand. "What are you working on?" she asked without looking up. "Just going over a few numbers," I said. She nodded, uninterested, and moved on. I watched her take slow sips from her cup. That's when I realized something else. She didn't expect me to question anything. Not the wedding. Not the photos. Not even my absence from a day that any decent partner would have been part of. And that's when the quiet started hardening inside me. The kind of quiet that isn't weak. The kind that observes. That calculates. That makes a decision. I didn't confront her. I didn't shout. What good would that do? Her mother would laugh it off. Mira would roll her eyes and say I was being sensitive. Mason would shrug and pretend he had no idea. And Adeline would just blink and say something hollow like, I didn't think it mattered. I had become a ghost in my own marriage. I was present in form but erased from meaning. So, I decided I would play the part. From that day on, I moved differently. I stopped talking during dinner. She didn't seem to notice. I stopped suggesting family plans. She didn't seem to care. When her mother called and left her phone on speaker, I just listened. I took in the way Delphine referred to me like an outsider. What does he think about that? Is he going to pay for it? Tell him we'll call when we need him. They spoke about me like I wasn't in the room. So I became exactly what they treated me as, unseen. But inside, I was wide awake. I didn't know what I was planning yet. All I knew was something had shifted. Something permanent. And it wasn't about anger. It was about awareness. They had counted on me being dependable, quiet, forgiving, predictable. But that chapter had ended. They just didn't know it yet. It was a sunny Sunday when I made the mistake of driving past Myra's house. I hadn't been invited. Of course, I hadn't. But something pulled me that way. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the ache of wanting to believe that I was still part of something. Maybe just foolish habit. I don't know. What I do know is that as I slowed near her driveway, the same familiar cars were lined up out front. Myra's red coupe, Delphine's clunky SUV, Mason's new silver sedan. I recognized all of them instantly, like names on a guest list I was never added to. And through the open windows, I heard laughter. Genuine, easy laughter. I sat in my car across the street and just listened. The clinking of dishes, the sound of chairs scooting across the hardwood floor, someone turning up music on a Bluetooth speaker. Bacon. I could smell bacon from my window. I'd cooked it for them before. Mira liked hers crispy. Delphine always scolded me for burning the edges. I used to think that meant she cared. But that morning, sitting there in a car I paid for, parked near a home I helped renovate, something cracked in me. They were celebrating again. Together. And once again, I was the ghost they never spoke of. I stared at the sidewalk for a long time. People passed by walking dogs, pushing strollers. Normal life kept moving while I sat in the middle of it, paralyzed by the truth that had been growing louder with each day. They never considered me family. I was the man who paid. That's it. Myra's husband, Grant, had called me 3 months ago when their hot water heater burst. Said he didn't know who else to call. I had a guy there in an hour. Paid the bill, too, because Grant said he was waiting on a client payment and Mira was stressed. Then there was the new windows at Delphine's house. The old ones had leaks. I'd arranged the contractor and wired the deposit myself. No one thanked me. They acted like it was expected, like breathing. And I let them. I didn't want to admit that. But sitting in that car, watching Myra's front door swing open to reveal trays of food and happy people with wine glasses, I understood what I had become. I wasn't a member of their circle. I was a resource, a backup plan, a wallet that smiled. And they didn't even have the decency to pretend otherwise. I drove off in silence, passing by familiar streets, landmarks that used to make me smile, like the bench Adeline and I once sat on after our first real fight. Now, everything felt hollow. Every corner had a memory that had been edited, bleached of warmth. When I got home, I didn't go inside right away. I stood in the driveway, hands in my pockets, looking at the house I once thought of as ours. But even it had started to feel borrowed, temporary. Like the key in my hand unlocked something I no longer had a place in. I walked through the door quietly. The living room was empty. A pile of shopping bags sat near the stairs. Adeline must have gone out with Mira the day before. Probably shopping for Mason's housewarming or something equally meaningless. I didn't ask. I didn't want to give her the opportunity to lie. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, went into the study, and called Theo. Theo and I had been friends since college. He was a lawyer now. Sharp, precise, and more loyal than anyone I'd ever met. He'd been the best man at my wedding, though no one from Adeline's side ever really warmed up to him. Too blunt, they said. Too serious. But I'd take blunt over fake any day. Long time, he said when he picked up. Everything all right? No, I said. But it will be. He didn't press. Just waited. I told him everything. About the wedding. The laughter. The photos. About sitting outside Myra's brunch like an idiot hoping someone might call. I told him about the money, the repairs, the family that had silently cut me out while still dipping into my pockets like it was tradition. There was a long pause on his end. Then he asked, "You want out?" I didn't answer right away. I stared at the window beside me, watching a squirrel run along the fence line. "No," I said finally. "I want silence." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You don't want to confront them?" I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. They don't deserve confrontation. They'll spin it, laugh it off, twist my words. I just want silence. Clean, cold silence. I can do that, he said. But silence is a powerful tool. Once you go that route, you can't shout later. I don't want to shout, I replied. I want to vanish. But I want them to feel it. Theo exhaled. All right, let's get to work then. We discussed accounts, transfers, and how to quietly untangle myself from every financial thread connecting me to the Andersons. I'd kept everything in my name or my holding company, but I'd never enforced boundaries. That was about to change. We drafted the first set of documents that night. And when I hung up, I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel grief. I felt something better. Clarity. I walked back into the living room and found Adeline on the couch, phone in hand, laughing softly at something Mira must have sent. She looked up and smiled. "You okay?" she asked, like nothing had changed. I nodded. Then I looked at her and saw a woman who believed I would always be here. A man who would always pay, always support, always stay. And in that moment, I finally understood. They didn't erase me because they hated me. They erased me because they thought I would never leave. The following Monday, Theo and I met over breakfast at a quiet little diner outside the city. It was the kind of place where nobody asked questions and everyone minded their own business. I didn't want to meet in a law office or a boardroom. I didn't want this to feel like a war, just like a decision. A correction. Theo brought a folder with him. Inside were the documents I needed to sever the quiet chains I had spent years wrapping around myself. He slid the folder across the table with his usual no-nonsense expression. "It's all here," he said, tapping the cover. "Renovation payouts, property maintenance grants, discretionary contributions, every last one of them routed through your personal holding firm. You've been a generous man." I opened it and skimmed the pages. Contracts, authorizations, amendments I had signed without thinking twice, because family needed help, because I believed helping them made me part of something. "I want it all paused," I said quietly. "Every cent, every automatic payment. I don't want a single light bulb changed unless they call me personally." Theo nodded. "I'll get the order signed today, and I've set up alerts in case they try to go around you." I sipped my coffee slowly, thinking of the look that would cross Delphine's face when the plumber said payment never came. The confusion in Myra's voice when the contractor refused to continue fixing the patio. The moment Adeline would try to spin it into another technical mix-up. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Later that afternoon, I sat at my desk in the study and began removing myself from every informal tie I had to them. I called the gardener who maintained Delphine's lawn and told him not to expect next month's payment. I emailed the property insurance rep and revoked the coverage extension I'd added for Myra's leaking ceiling. I didn't explain. I didn't make excuses. Just a line here, a cancellation there, silent redirection. And then I waited. It took 5 days. On the 6th morning, I was having coffee on the porch when my phone buzzed. Delphine's name lit up the screen. I stared at it, let it ring until the final chime, and then picked up. I wasn't angry. I wasn't curious. I just wanted to hear how she would spin it. "Hello," I said, as calmly as if she were an old coworker calling to check in. "Oh, thank God," she sighed, in that over-the-top voice of hers. "Darling, I just got off the phone with that terrible builder. He said the kitchen work's been stopped. Something about funds not going through." I said nothing. I told him that must be a mistake, of course. "I mean, you've always handled these things. Is it a bank issue?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the wind chimes Adeline had bought 2 summers ago. They clinked softly in the breeze like they were mocking her mother's voice. "No mistake," I said plainly. A beat of silence on the other end. I'm sorry," she said. I gave a quiet chuckle and replied, "Didn't I tell you?" "What?" I repeated it slowly, gently, with the same emptiness her daughter had once offered me across our kitchen table. "Didn't I tell you?" She paused. I could hear her trying to decide whether to laugh again, whether this was some odd joke she didn't quite get yet. But I didn't wait for her to find footing. "I'll let you sort it out with Mason. Or Mira. I'm sure they've got it handled." Then I ended the call. It wasn't slamming a door. It was turning off a light. Later that day, Mira texted me. Just 2 words. "Payment issue?" I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the filing cabinet and pulled out the folder labeled Anderson Affairs. Yes, I had finally started naming things properly. I placed their folder beside others, business accounts, real estate ventures, trusts. I looked at them all and realized something stunning. Every person in that family had benefited from me. Everyone. And not once did they treat me like I belonged. For dinner that night, Adeline made pasta. I could hear her humming while she stirred in the kitchen. She didn't ask how my day was. She didn't mention the calls. She didn't seem to know her mother had been cut off or that Mira was now pacing an H. She asked about the weekend. I said I'd be working. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The next evening, I came home to find her mother and sister sitting in the living room. Delphine stood the moment I entered, like a politician pretending to welcome an old ally. "Oh good, you're home," she said, her voice strained with something she didn't know how to hide. Fear? Confusion? Entitlement? All of it. Maybe. Mira gave me a small wave. "We thought we'd come talk in person. Sort things out." I didn't sit. I walked to the hallway table, pulled out the envelope I had prepared earlier, and handed it to Delphine. She opened it right there. Inside was a packet of itemized receipts, contractor logs, maintenance records, everything I had paid for over the past 3 years. Every leak, every wall, every nail. "This," I said, "is what humor used to cost me." Her eyes darted across the pages, realization dawning like thunder. "I didn't keep score before," I continued, "because I believed I was part of this family. I thought love was a shared thing, but it turns out it was just a tab I didn't know I'd opened. Delphine tried to speak. I didn't let her. And now the account is closed. I turned and left the room, walked straight upstairs, and shut the door behind me. I didn't hear them leave. I didn't care. For the first time in years, the house was finally quiet. Not empty. Not tense. Just quiet. And I liked it. Adeline tried to act like nothing had happened, as if her mother and sister hadn't just sat in our living room, clutching receipts like they'd never seen accountability before, as if I hadn't just laid out the truth in black and white. She cooked dinner that night, lemon chicken with roasted potatoes. That was her peace offering meal, the one she used when she sensed tension she didn't want to talk about. But I wasn't hungry. Not for food. Not for another round of emotional amnesia. "You've barely touched your plate," she said, cutting into her chicken. "I'm not hungry," I answered without looking up. She put her fork down. "You could have told me you were cutting off the payments. You could have told me about your brother's wedding," I said quietly, still not looking at her. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. I saw it from the corner of my eye. That moment when someone considers whether lying is still worth it. But for once, she didn't deny it. She just sighed, picked up her glass of wine, and drank. "It was a misunderstanding," she murmured after a while. "It wasn't malicious. You're reading into it too much." I turned to her. "A misunderstanding is forgetting to grab milk on the way home, not erasing your husband from your brother's wedding." She flinched, and for a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, there was something close to shame in her face. But it passed quickly, replaced by that calm, practiced indifference. "You're being dramatic." There it was. The words didn't sting. Not anymore. I'd already bled dry. Now I was just walking through the ashes. "I'm moving into the guest room," I said calmly. "Starting tonight." Adeline didn't react immediately. She just stared at me like I had said I was changing the curtains. "Seriously?" she said after a moment. "You're going to sulk around the house like some ghost?" I stood up, picked up my half-full plate, and walked it to the sink. "No. I'm going to live like someone who's finally woken up." That night, I moved my clothes downstairs. The guest room was small, but it was mine. I changed the bed sheets, cleaned out the drawers, and for the first time in months, slept without the weight of pretending. The days after that were quiet. Not in the peaceful sense, more like the quiet of a battlefield after the smoke clears and everyone's waiting to see who moves first. I kept to myself, cooked my own meals, did my own laundry. When Adeline left for work, she stopped announcing it. When she came home, she'd glance at the guest room door like it offended her by existing. I didn't care. I was no longer interested in making her comfortable with what she had done. A week passed before she tried to press reset. One evening, I heard the clinking of glasses and the sound of her voice calling out to her mother. Apparently, they were coming over again, this time to talk things out over wine and dessert. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten to leave. I just stayed in my room, listened. Delphine opened with a joke, of course. Something dry and layered with condescension. "I always knew you had a dramatic side," she said through laughter. "You should have been in theater. Maybe then you'd be too busy to cut off our roof repairs." Adeline laughed with her. Mira joined in from the kitchen, chiming something about how I must be going through a midlife ego crisis. I walked out of the guest room, slow and quiet, and stepped into the hallway. None of them saw me at first. Then Delphine turned, smile still plastered on her face, until she saw what I was holding. An envelope. Another one. She rolled her eyes, still playing the role of the amused matriarch. "Is this another bill breakdown, sweetheart?" "No," I said. "This one's on the house." I walked to the coffee table and placed it down between the wine glasses. Inside were not receipts this time, but copies of emails. Screenshots of text messages. Correspondence between contractors I had paid and her family requesting extras, spa-like upgrades, fancy lighting, unnecessary additions that ballooned costs because, in Myra's words, he's good for it. "This," I said evenly, "is what entitlement looks like in writing." The laughter stopped. Even Mira stopped stirring her drink. Delphine opened the envelope, pulled out the pages, and went silent. I looked at Adeline. She was frozen, her hand still holding a spoon over the dessert bowl, unmoving. "I didn't come out here to argue," I said. "I didn't come to reclaim anything. I came to remind you that I was never invisible. You just chose to look past me." Then I turned and walked back to my room. Left them in their designer clothes, surrounded by half-eaten tiramisu and sour wine. They didn't follow. Later that night, I heard them leave. Doors closing harder than necessary. Tires screeching down the street. Adeline didn't come to the guest room. She stayed upstairs. Maybe crying. Maybe stewing. I didn't check. I didn't care. Something strange happened after that night. I began to feel lighter. Not happier. Not yet. But freer. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. I started working out again. Waking up early. Reading books I'd left gathering dust on the shelf. My mind felt clearer without the emotional weight of constantly waiting for validation. Then one day, I got an email from a contractor I hadn't heard from in months. Someone Delphine had referred for Myra's second renovation attempt. Hey, just confirming. They said you'd be covering the new tile job too? I replied with 2 words. Not involved. Silence. Sweet silence. From that point on, I stopped bracing myself for the next manipulation, the next insult dressed as a joke, the next request laced in fake warmth. I knew what I was now. I was no longer the man who pays but isn't family. I was the man who remembers everything and forgets nothing. I left the house before sunrise. Not out of anger. Not to make a scene. Just a quiet decision after too many days of watching my own reflection fade in a home I no longer recognized. I had packed a small duffel bag the night before. A few shirts, a laptop, my documents, and the spare keys to a condo I'd bought 5 years earlier, back when I still believed in the concept of future-proofing my life. The condo sat on the 9th floor of a high-rise on the quiet side of the city. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the skyline, and the one thing I hadn't realized I missed until I opened the door, space to breathe. The silence there was different. Not the tense kind that sat between 2 people in a house that had grown too big with emotional distance. No, this silence was clean. It was mine. I dropped my bag, exhaled, and let the weight of months fall off my shoulders all at once. For the first time in years, I was alone with my thoughts, and they weren't screaming. Adeline didn't call. Not that day. Not the next. Maybe she assumed it was another phase. A silent protest that would end with me crawling back to her side like I always had. Or maybe she simply didn't notice. I wasn't sure which truth hurt more. 3 days passed before my phone buzzed. It was Mira. We need help finishing the foundation work at Mom's place. You know she's getting older. This delay is stressing her out. No, hi. No, how are you? No acknowledgement of the last conversation. Just another request. Another assumption. I stared at the message for a few seconds, then tapped the call button. She answered on the second ring, as chipper as ever. I knew you'd call back, she said with a smug little laugh. Seriously, though, the builder is being difficult. He says without a new deposit, he won't finish. I'm sure Mason can handle it. I interrupted calmly. There was a pause. Mason? She asked. But he had a lovely wedding. I continued. Didn't he? She didn't speak. I let the silence stretch. I wanted her to feel what I had been feeling for months. That tight, sinking quiet when someone forgets you on purpose. When they leave you behind and pretend it was an accident. The line clicked. She had hung up. I smiled. Not a cruel smile. Just one of realization. The thing about silence is that once you stop filling it for other people, it becomes a weapon they don't know how to defend against. They're used to your yes, your convenience, your explanations. When those disappear, so does their control. Days passed. No more calls from Mira. No text from Delphine. Not a single word from Adeline. And for once, I didn't wait by the phone. Instead, I worked. I set up my desk near the window. I opened projects I'd been meaning to start for years. I cleaned out my inbox. Caught up with old clients. I even reached out to a few nonprofits that had been sitting on my radar. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about living in my own name again. I cooked my own meals, played jazz in the mornings, and sometimes just sat in silence, staring at the skyline, thinking about nothing in particular. That to me was the greatest shift. I wasn't constantly rehearsing arguments in my head anymore. I wasn't defending myself to ghosts. One afternoon, I walked to the cafe down the street. A new barista named Jen took my order. She smiled when I told her my name, scribbled it on the cup, and said, "Nice to see a regular face." Most folks around here just glare at their phones. Trying not to be one of them anymore, I said. She grinned. Good luck. That night, I checked my phone again. Still nothing. But it didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like peace. And just when I thought they'd finally decided to leave me be, Delphine called again. This time, her voice was different. Edgy. Forced calm wrapped in panic. The roof is leaking, she said without preamble. The builder is threatening legal action. What is going on? I looked out my window at the city lights and sipped from my mug before responding. I'm sure Mason or Adeline can help, I said, mirroring her own dismissiveness. They said it was your responsibility, she snapped. And there it was. The truth they'd never admit openly. I had been the backbone of their comfort. The unspoken agreement was that I would pay, fix, provide, protect, and ask for nothing in return. Didn't I tell you? I said softly. What? I let the words sit. Let her feel the same chill I'd felt when her daughter showed me wedding photos I didn't know existed. Let her choke on the same emptiness I'd swallowed for years. Didn't I tell you? I repeated, and then ended the call. An hour later, Adeline finally broke the silence. She didn't call. She came. I heard the knock at my condo door around 9:15 p.m. When I opened it, she stood there in a coat too thin for the cold and eyes red like she hadn't slept. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. I stepped aside but didn't say a word. She walked in slowly, looking around like she was seeing me for the first time in years. This place is nice, she said, voice small. I nodded. She sat down on the edge of the couch, twisting her hands together. This is your family too, she said, barely above a whisper. You can't just leave them like this. No, I said, standing near the window. Family doesn't erase you from photos, or celebrations, or homes. She looked down at her hands. I made a mistake, she said. I didn't think it would matter. That hurt more than anything. You didn't think it would matter. I didn't reply. She looked up. Can we talk? I let the silence answer. And for the first time, she sat in it. No defenses. No jokes. Just her, staring at a version of me she hadn't met before. The one who wouldn't carry shame that didn't belong to him. When she finally stood up to leave, she turned to me. Do you still love me? I looked at her, long and steady. I love who I used to be when I was with you, but I don't miss who I became. She nodded, eyes welling up, and left without another word. And I returned to my silence. Not because I was broken, but because I was finally whole. When people underestimate you long enough, you stop correcting them. You let them believe what they want. That's what I did. For years, the Andersons treated me like I was just an IT consultant, just another tech guy who got lucky marrying into their family. They never asked deeper questions about what I did, how I built my business, or why I never seemed to stress about money. They weren't interested in my world, just in what I could offer theirs. That suited me fine, because the less they knew, the more control I had. They didn't know I owned the consulting firm I worked at. They didn't know I'd purchased rental properties across the city through a holding company with a generic name they'd never recognize. They didn't know that half the people they gossiped about at brunch, landlords, HOA board members, building inspectors, had my number saved in their phones. And they had no idea that Delphine's beloved house, the same one I helped save from foreclosure 5 years ago, was still tied to a lien I held quietly, legally, and indisputably. Back then, Mason had gotten himself into some gambling trouble. He asked his mother for help. She, in turn, asked me. The house was at risk, and they needed a co-signer to keep the second mortgage from collapsing. I didn't ask questions. I just signed. Of course, I made sure the paperwork protected me. A quiet clause in the agreement allowed me to convert the lien into an enforceable debt if certain conditions weren't met. They weren't, not by a long shot. And now, as I sat in my condo, watching the evening traffic drift like ants below, I realized I was holding something far more powerful than anger, leverage. Theo came over that night. He had a thick folder with him, updated LLC records, new legal notices, and a summary of every transaction we were moving under private control. This one, he said, pointing to the page with Delphine's property, is your ace. The city inspector's report is enough to trigger the debt clause. If you wanted, we could move to seize her equity within 30 days. I didn't smile. Not out of restraint, but because there was nothing to gloat about. I don't want the house, I said. Theo raised an eyebrow. Then what do you want? I want them to feel it, I said quietly. I want them to know what it's like to live with the sound of a door closing in their face. He nodded. He understood. We finalized the documents. My ownership's now public. My involvement, now official. All renovations routed through my firms, canceled. All scheduled maintenance plans revoked. They'd have to go through new inspections, new estimates, with contractors who didn't know them, and certainly didn't care about their last name. The Anderson family facade, polished smiles, borrowed charm, whispered judgments, was beginning to show its cracks. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't announce anything. I just let the systems do what they were designed to do. A week later, I got an email from a property manager confirming cancellation of the upcoming roofing work for Ms. Anderson's residence. Client unable to verify authorized payment source. A day after that, Myra's name popped up on my phone. I let it ring out. Then she sent a voice note. You really think this is funny? Mom's stressed out of her mind. The new contractors are asking for upfront deposits we can't cover yet. You know how long it takes to get approved for a new loan? You're making this harder than it needs to be. I played the message twice. Not because I was unsure of her tone. I just wanted to hear how deeply she believed I still belonged to their service. A few hours later, Mason texted. Not sure what's going on with Mom's house. Can we talk? I didn't reply. That night, I received a message from someone I didn't expect, Lucy, Mason's wife. We'd never been particularly close. She was always pleasant, always neutral. I used to think it was because she was shy. Now, I realized she was just observant. She hadn't joined the laughter when I was erased from Mason's wedding. In fact, I barely saw her in the photos that Adeline showed me. Her message was short. I'm sorry. I didn't know. If I had, I wouldn't have gone through with it the same way. You deserved better. I read it twice, then locked my phone. The next day, I stopped by one of the properties I owned in the Eastwood district. It was an apartment complex with 12 units and a management team that answered directly to me. I stood in the courtyard for a while, listening to the sound of kids playing nearby, watching tenants go about their evening routines. It reminded me of how much I'd built quietly, carefully. While everyone else was busy judging appearances, I was investing, protecting, preparing. I remembered a night years ago when Delphine had joked that I wasn't ambitious like Mason, that my job was cute but not impressive. I had laughed then, shrugged it off. But now, as I stood on the balcony of my own building, I realized I wasn't the quiet one. They were the blind ones. And their ignorance had been the greatest gift they ever gave me. A few days later, Theo called. They got the letter, he said. Delphine's hired a new attorney. She's panicking, trying to renegotiate terms on the lien. And she can't. You gave them 5 years of goodwill. You're within your rights. I exhaled. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vengeful. I was just done. And being done is one of the most powerful feelings in the world. I ended the call and looked around my condo. The light was soft through the windows. The air was clean. My inbox was quiet. My conscience, even quieter. They could keep their laughter, their brunches, their weddings. I had my name. I had my voice. And finally, I had my peace. It happened faster than I expected. The unraveling, the chaos, the slow public exposure of everything they tried to keep wrapped in artificial grace. It started with a voicemail from Delphine, shaky, out of breath, and no longer laced with superiority. I need you to call me back. Please. The new builder's threatening legal action. Says we defaulted on the revised contract. I didn't even know there was a new contract. They said it was under your name. She sounded like a woman who had lost control of the narrative. And for the first time, I didn't. I never called her back. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I needed to protect myself from becoming their crutch again. That same day, I got a text from Adeline. It was long. Too long. I didn't even read it all the way through. Just skimmed over phrases like, I didn't know it would get this bad, and there's still family, and we shouldn't let money destroy everything. Money didn't destroy anything. Silence did. Entitlement did. The belief that I would never push back did. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by my window. Below, the city moved on without any awareness of the storm circling the Anderson name. The same people who once laughed behind my back were now realizing that they had built their comfort on foundations they didn't own. A few days later, Adeline showed up again. She didn't text, didn't call, just knocked. I saw her through the peephole, hair tied back, no makeup, wearing the navy blue sweater I'd bought her 3 birthdays ago. I opened the door slowly. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Just looked at me. Eyes searching. Can I come in? She asked. I let her. She sat on the edge of the couch like she had during her first visit, only now her shoulders slumped with something heavier. We're in trouble, she said. I know, I replied. She glanced up at me, surprised I wasn't offering comfort. I didn't move to sit beside her. I stayed standing. They're falling apart. Mom can't refinance the house because of the lien. Myra's business partner backed out. Mason and Lucy are fighting almost every day. It's like everything is just breaking. I nodded. Because it was never built properly. She blinked, stunned at my calm. I didn't come here to beg, she said finally. I just needed you to know that it's not all jokes and brunches anymore. We're dealing with real things now. Good, I said. Real things are overdue. She flinched a little. You think we deserve this? I think consequences are part of adulthood, I answered. And I think when you leave someone out, repeatedly, cruelly, carelessly, you don't get to act shocked when they stop playing their part. She went quiet again. I came to ask for dinner, she said finally. Not a favor. Not money. Just one dinner. Just to talk. I tilted my head, studied her for a second, and then said, I'll think about it. The next day, I didn't go to work. I took the morning off and drove past Myra's salon. It had a big "For Lease" sign taped on the glass. I parked and stepped out just to get a closer look. The space was empty now. Chairs gone. Reception desk removed. A faded poster of Mira still hung in the corner window, smiling beside a curling iron and the slogan "Confidence starts here." Ironic. I stood there for a moment, then got back into my car. Later that afternoon, I stopped by one of my commercial properties. Theo had arranged a meeting with a new tenant, an up-and-coming design firm looking for office space. I toured them through the building, shook hands, negotiated with a clear mind. It felt good, clean, purposeful. After they left, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Adeline, and 1 voicemail. I hesitated, then hit play. I know you think I don't care. I know you think I was part of everything that happened, but I wasn't trying to hurt you. I didn't want to rock the boat. I thought it was easier to let things slide. And now everything's capsized, and I get it. Maybe I deserve this. But I do miss you. I miss how you used to take care of everything. I miss who we were before all of this. I deleted the message. Not out of spite, but because I didn't want to carry her longing when she had never carried mine. That night, I cooked for myself. Steak, roasted garlic, sautéed vegetables. I set the table, lit a candle, ate slowly, savoring the silence not as punishment, but as presence. My presence. I remembered how many dinners I had spent surrounded by people who looked through me, how many events I had paid for but hadn't been welcomed at, how many laughs were shared at my expense while I smiled politely and poured the wine. Now I was alone, and it was the most peace I'd known in years. The fall of the Anderson family facade wasn't loud. It didn't come with breaking headlines or dramatic public arguments. It came in quiet losses, canceled projects, frozen accounts, failed loans, broken relationships, things they'd taken for granted slowly slipping away. And not once did I have to raise my voice. They unraveled themselves. I just stopped holding the thread. The news came through a friend I hadn't spoken to in months. His name was Ray, and he used to be Mason's co-worker, one of the few decent people in that circle who had eyes, ears, and a conscience. He called one afternoon while I was reviewing lease renewals in my condo office. You hear what happened with Mason and Lucy? He asked. No, I replied, already knowing it wouldn't be good. They're separated. She moved out last weekend, took all her stuff, and went back to her sister's place. Told everyone at brunch it was because of what happened with you. Said the family's treatment of you made her sick. I blinked, sat back in my chair. She said that. Word for word, Ray said. Apparently, she didn't even know about the wedding stuff until someone brought it up at a dinner. When she found out you weren't invited, and the way they laughed about it, she lost it. Said if they could do that to you, they could do it to anyone. I didn't say much after that. Just nodded, thanked him for the call, and hung up. It should have made me feel victorious. It didn't. All I felt was confirmation. Confirmation that I had never imagined the cruelty. That I wasn't overly sensitive. That the quiet way I'd been pushed aside was, in fact, real and visible to others. I went for a walk that evening. The streets were lit with that soft golden hour hue that makes everything look cinematic. People walked their dogs. A couple laughed outside a bakery. Life moved on. My heart felt oddly still. Mira got engaged around that same time. Word spread quickly. She'd posted it all over social media. Close-up shots of the ring. Long captions about love and second chances. But what stood out wasn't the announcement. It was the silence that followed. No one offered to pay for her venue. No one offered to host. Even Delphine, once the queen of arranging events for her children, was suddenly occupied with repairs and contractor disputes. The financial safety net I had quietly provided for over 5 years had vanished, and with it, their image of effortless stability. A week later, Mira called me. I didn't answer. She texted instead. I just want to know if we can be civil. I'd still love to have you at the wedding. You're important to us. I read it. Deleted it. I wasn't angry. Just done. That same night, I received one more message. From Adeline. It wasn't long. I miss how you used to take care of everything. That line hung in my chest longer than I wanted it to. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't accountability. It was nostalgia, selective and convenient. She missed the ease I created, the invisible scaffolding I built around all of them, so they could shine while I faded. I didn't respond. Instead, I stood by the window and looked out at the city again. Every time I did, it reminded me of who I was outside their orbit. A man who could build, protect, think, provide. Not because it was expected, but because it was who I am. They never really knew that man. They only knew the quiet husband, the predictable provider, the man who folded napkins and laughed when they joked at his expense. I was not that man anymore. And strangely, I felt sorry for Adeline, because she was mourning the wrong thing. She thought she missed me, but what she really missed was control. 2 days later, I got a call from Theo. Thought you'd like to know, he said. Delphine's attorney reached out. She's trying to settle the lien out of court. They're terrified the house will be listed. Let her sweat, I said. Already is. We shared a quiet laugh. Then he said something that caught me off guard. Ever thought about letting go entirely? I paused. What do you mean? I mean the paperwork's done. You're protected. Their access is cut. You've made your point. Do you want to stay tethered to any of it? Or do you want to walk away clean? I didn't answer immediately. That night, I sat alone on my balcony, the air cool and still, and really thought about it. For the first time since this began, I considered what it would feel like to stop not just responding, but remembering. Not just defending, but detaching. To stop letting them rent space in my mind. To let the chapter close, no final paragraph, no dramatic ending. Just a silent page turn. It felt possible. And that was enough. So when I woke the next morning, I called Theo back. Start the process, I said. All of it. All of it. Cut the lien. Finalize the property transfers. Close out anything still tethered to their names or their chaos. Let them live in the world they created, without me. Because that's what they chose. I was just honoring it. It's been almost a year now. A full turn of the calendar since the day I stood in my own kitchen and was told, without hesitation, without apology, that my wife had attended her brother's wedding without me. A year since Mira laughed from the couch and asked, "Didn't we tell you?" while her mother sipped wine like I wasn't standing in the room. A year since I folded napkins with hope in my chest and went to bed with silence in my lungs. And now? Now I live in a home that I chose. Every piece of furniture was handpicked by me, not bought to impress anyone or match someone else's idea of elegance. My mornings start with peace. My nights end without noise. I don't check my phone, bracing for another passive-aggressive text. I don't carry invisible debts for invisible roles in a family that never truly welcomed me. I carry only myself. And that has been enough. The condo, my condo, has become something I didn't know I needed. A refuge, not from the world, but from the version of myself I used to be. The man who explained too much, gave too much, waited too long for people who would never clap when he walked into a room. The silence is no longer a wound. It's a wall I built, brick by brick, to keep out noise I no longer accept. Last week, I hosted dinner. A small one. Nothing extravagant. Just a few people I trust, people who never made me prove my worth. Theo brought wine, of course. He's become more than just my lawyer. He's my anchor in storms I didn't know I was allowed to step out of. My sister, Nadia, flew in from Florida with her boyfriend. She used to worry about me. Now she just hugs me longer and smiles wider. We sat around the table, my table, and passed plates without judgment, without tension, without pretending. It wasn't fancy. No caterers, no floral arrangements, no performance. Just laughter, real stories, and clean plates. Sometime after dessert, Theo leaned back in his chair and asked the question I knew was coming. Do you ever hear from Adeline's family anymore? The room got quiet, not uncomfortably, just curiously. Everyone looked to me like they were waiting for some dramatic revelation. I smiled. Not anymore, I said. I finally got the hint. Laughter followed, warm and knowing. And that was it. The chapter closed with a single sentence. No rage. No revenge. Just a fact. I hadn't blocked any of them. I hadn't sent cruel messages or broadcasted their downfall. I simply stopped showing up where I wasn't seen. Stopped carrying weight for people who would never lift mine. That was my justice. And it was enough. The next morning, I got up early and went for a walk. There's a trail near the condo that leads down to a quiet park by the water. I go there often now when I want to think, when I want to feel grounded. There's a bench I like. From there, I can see the reflection of the city skyline on the lake. The same skyline I used to stare at from my office window during sleepless nights, wondering if I was the problem, wondering if maybe I wasn't trying hard enough to earn a seat at their table. But sitting here now, I understand what I didn't then. It was never about trying harder. It was about realizing I was trying for the wrong people. People who mistook kindness for weakness. People who saw silence as consent. People who believed being family meant being owed. I stayed in that system for so long because I thought loyalty meant endurance. But loyalty without respect is just self-abandonment dressed up in polite manners. And I'm not that man anymore. I've rebuilt my world now. Smaller. Tighter. Built not on obligation, but on mutual presence. No more pretending. No more squinting to find value in people who refuse to offer it freely. Sometimes, I see glimpses of the Andersons in public posts, someone tags Mason in a group photo, or Mira uploads a story about her wedding planning struggles. I scroll past. Not with bitterness. With disinterest. They live in a chapter I've already closed. Adeline? She tried reaching out a few more times. Once through email. Another time through a letter she dropped off at the front desk. I read the first paragraph. That was enough. The rest, I let go unread. She said she missed me. But really, she missed the convenience I offered. The quiet man in the background, solving problems without being seen. That version of me is gone. Buried beneath every unpaid debt. Every inside joke that left me out, every party I funded but was never truly invited to. And what replaced him? A man who smiles when his phone is quiet. A man who eats alone when necessary and never feels alone. A man who hosts dinners around tables he built, chairs he chose, with people who show up without needing to be convinced to care. So if anyone ever asks what happened to me, where I went, why I don't speak, why I never returned, I'll say this. I didn't leave with anger. I left with clarity. And when they finally realized what I carried, I was already gone. The morning of your wedding is supposed to feel like a dream. It's meant to be full of quiet nerves, joyful anticipation, the kind of butterflies that flutter in your stomach when you're about to step into forever. I had woken up early that day, still in our apartment, a place that Alina and I had filled with shared furniture, scented candles, and the carefully chosen color palette she said made her feel calm. I made coffee. I stood in front of the window with my mug in hand, staring out at the city I'd always loved, and I told myself today was going to be perfect. Then I got the text. Don't go to your wedding. Check your fiancé's closet. It was from Miles, my younger brother. He's always had a weird sense of humor, always playing pranks or dropping cryptic one-liners, especially when tension ran high. I actually laughed a little at first, thinking maybe it was his version of pre-wedding jitters. A closet? What could he possibly mean by that? I set my coffee down and typed out a reply. Seriously? Now's not the time for this. But he didn't respond. No winky face. No punchline. Nothing. That was the first time my gut twisted. The apartment was still. Alina had left before sunrise with her bridesmaids to get ready at the venue's bridal suite. She'd kissed me on the cheek, said she couldn't wait to walk down the aisle. I still remembered the way her perfume lingered in the hallway after she shut the door. I stared at the message again. Then I looked at the bedroom. Everything looked normal, pillows perfectly aligned, the wedding itinerary she'd printed still sitting on the dresser, even the soft blush robe she wore the night before hung neatly over the chair. My legs moved on their own, slowly, like I was walking underwater. I opened her closet. At first, I didn't even notice anything strange. There were her dresses, shoes lined up by color, a few scarves and purses tucked into organizers. Everything was too neat. But then my eyes dropped to the floor. There was a white shoebox pushed to the back corner. I pulled it out and lifted the lid. That's when the world stopped. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Glossy, candid, intimate. Not of us. No. These were of her. And him. Grayson. Her ex. I recognized him instantly, the guy she had sworn was just a high school chapter, someone who meant nothing anymore. They were holding hands on a beach. Sitting at a restaurant with wine glasses raised. There was one where he was brushing her hair back as she laughed. My stomach tightened. Then I found one of them in a bed. Shirtless. Her lips on his neck. I dropped the box. But it wasn't done. I reached down, stunned, and grabbed a stack of papers that had spilled out emails. Printed emails. Why would she print them? I flipped through the top one. Her words. He's so naive. Once I'm his wife, we'll be together. We'll take the house, the company, everything. Then I'll leave. And he'll never know what hit him. I froze. I think my hands were shaking, but I couldn't feel them. Couldn't feel my legs either. The walls were pressing in. All I can see were the black letters on that white page, and her voice in my head, sweet and smooth and poisonous. It wasn't just infidelity. It wasn't just lies. It was a plan. A detailed, surgical betrayal. A heist. And I was the fool marked for it. I backed away from the closet like it might explode. My breathing came in short bursts. Everything felt unreal. I sat down on the edge of the bed we used to share. The sunlight coming through the window now felt harsh and mocking. I was supposed to be putting on my tux by now. I was supposed to be looking at my vows, maybe texting Miles or Jonas or my dad to say how ready I was. I was supposed to be thinking about the first dance, the cake, the honeymoon we'd planned in Greece. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed, holding pieces of my own humiliation in my hands. I picked up my phone and called Miles. He answered on the first ring. You saw it? He asked quietly. Yes, I said. Just one word. That was all I could manage. I was at Barcrest 2 nights ago, he said. Saw her with Grayson. They were drunk, talking like nobody could hear them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, man. I followed them out, got photos, sent them to myself. I knew you wouldn't believe it without seeing it. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know how to tell you. But you deserve to know. I'm sorry. You saved me, I whispered. You don't need to apologize. I stared at the closet, at everything that had once been hers and now felt foreign. For a long time, I just sat there, not crying, not screaming, just empty. And then, something shifted. It was like the fog in my brain began to lift. I stood up, walked into the living room, and stared out the window again. But this time, I wasn't just looking. I was calculating. I'd been blindsided. But I wasn't going to be broken. Not quietly. I picked up my phone and started taking pictures, clear shots of the photos, the emails, the timestamped notes. I made a folder, encrypted it, uploaded a copy to the cloud. Then I opened the drawer where I'd kept the ring I was going to give her and stared at it for a second too long before slamming it shut. I wasn't going to that wedding as a victim. No, I was going as a man who knew the truth. And I was bringing the truth with me. The clock read 9:13 a.m. Just over 5 hours to the ceremony. I remember thinking time had never felt so heavy. Every second dragged like a brick across my back. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't look. I already knew it was probably her or someone from her side checking in. The planner. Her cousin. One of the groomsmen asking about cufflinks. But I couldn't answer. Not yet. I was still trying to breathe. The living room felt smaller by the minute, like the walls were closing in and the air was thick with the weight of the truth. I walked over to the sink and turned on the faucet, splashing cold water on my face, hoping it would somehow snap me back into clarity. But the sting of betrayal doesn't wash off that easily. What do you do when the person you trusted with your heart, your life, your future, was actually plotting to take it all? I built this life piece by piece. I wasn't born rich. The house, the company, the car, every single thing I owned was earned. Not handed. Not stolen. Earned with sacrifice. Sleepless nights. Missed birthdays. Hustle. And the woman I was going to marry, the one I thought was my partner, was ready to carve it all out of me with a smile on her face and a signature on a marriage certificate. I went back into the bedroom. The shoebox was still on the floor, its contents spilled like vomit. The photos looked up at me like ghosts. One of them had a date scribbled on the back. It was 2 months ago. 2 months ago, she was laughing in bed with him. And 2 nights later, she was crying in my arms, saying she was scared of how much she loved me. I sat down and picked up one of the letters. Not an email, an actual letter, folded in 4. Her handwriting. Flowing, sweet, like how she used to write me notes when we first met. Grayson, it's happening just like we hoped. I've got him eating out of the palm of my hand. He thinks I'm obsessed with him. Can you believe it? A few more days, and we're set. House, business, everything. Just be patient, baby. I'll make sure we walk away with more than just rings. I didn't even realize I was clenching my teeth until I felt the pressure in my jaw. It wasn't just betrayal. It was entertainment to her. And I was the joke. The kind of rage that rises in quiet waves started crawling up my chest. Not the explosive kind, but the cold, calculating kind. The kind that sharpens you instead of breaking you. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to throw anything. I'd seen people do that in movies. But this wasn't a movie. This was my life. My future. My reputation. And she wanted to use all of it like a credit card with no limit. I needed to act, not feel. I needed to make decisions, not drown in the pain. So I stood up, grabbed my laptop from the hallway desk, and logged into every account we shared. Email, bank, travel, even that silly wedding website she made with our photo on the homepage, us holding hands under fairy lights. Delete, delete, delete. I didn't want my name anywhere near hers anymore. Then I opened the company's financial dashboard. My business. My blood. I'd kept her name off the books, at least legally. She helped here and there with ideas, and sometimes she sat in on meetings to look pretty for clients, but she had no ownership. Thank God. I froze when I thought of what would have happened if I had added her as a partner. I would have handed her the keys. I changed all the passwords. Two-factor authentication. Biometric locks. I secured every digital door in my life like a fortress. My phone buzzed again. This time, I looked. It was Alina. Baby, is everything okay? Haven't heard from you this morning. The photographer says they'll be at the venue by noon. Can you believe it's really happening? Smiling face. That smiley face nearly made me throw the phone. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. How dare she? She had the nerve to pretend everything was fine, while a whole treasure chest of deceit sat just a few feet away in my closet. My closet. My home. I didn't respond. Instead, I stood up, grabbed a duffel bag, and began packing. Not just to leave, but because I knew what I needed to do next. I pulled out the folder of evidence, photos, emails, letters. I printed copies, scanned them, labeled each file. I'm a builder by trade, a systems guy, and suddenly my heartbreak turned into a plan. I laid everything out like I was prepping for court, because part of me knew that's where this would eventually end. Then I called Miles again. Yeah, he answered quickly. I need your help. With what? I paused. I'm not calling off the wedding. What? I explained it calmly. I want to show up. Let her walk down the aisle. Let everyone smile and cheer. And then I'll show them who she really is. Miles was silent. You sure? He finally asked. Dead sure. Okay, he said. What do you need me to do? I told him everything. From how to enter quietly to when to cue the video. He didn't interrupt once. When I was done, he exhaled and said, This is going to be brutal. She made it that way. By the time we hung up, I was already dressed. Not in my tux, but in a dark suit. Clean. Simple. No boutonniere. I didn't want to be the groom she planned to scam. I wanted to be the man she never saw coming. At 11:45 a.m., I walked out of the apartment for the last time. Locked the door behind me. I wasn't sure if I'd ever come back. That place didn't feel like home anymore. The car ride to the venue was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't rehearse any speech in my head. I just watched the buildings go by, watched strangers cross streets, laughing and living their normal lives, completely unaware that a man in the back seat was about to burn down his own wedding with the truth. By 12:30, I arrived. The sun was too bright. The guests were starting to gather outside. Some waved when they saw me. I nodded, smiled like a man about to marry the love of his life. But inside me, there was only stillness. A quiet storm waiting to erupt. The white rose archway was as tall as a doorway. Two flower girls were giggling at the base of it, tossing petals onto the green grass like they had no idea they were part of a lie. The outdoor setup was beautiful, I'll give her that. Alina had taste. The chairs were arranged in a perfect crescent, white bows tied on every one. The lake behind the altar shimmered under the sun like it, too, had dressed up for the event. From a distance, you would have thought it was a fairy tale. But I was the groom, and I knew better. A few guests saw me arrive and waved cheerfully. I kept smiling. I nodded. I even shook hands. Someone slapped my shoulder and said, You ready to be a husband, Logan? I said, more than ever. Every word I spoke tasted like metal. I scanned the faces. Her aunt from Phoenix. Her friend Cassandra, the one who always posted filtered selfies and called me boring. My father, seated in the second row, looked proud. My mother wiped at her eyes, probably already crying tears of joy. They'd all shown up for a celebration. None of them knew they were about to watch a revelation instead. Miles was already inside the reception hall, setting everything up. He gave me a short nod as I passed by, his eyes serious. He knew the plan. He knew the cue. and I knew the exact moment to light the match. The groom's suite was empty when I entered. Cool air, a rack with my tux hanging from it, a bottle of champagne waiting on the table. I didn't touch it. I didn't sit. I looked in the mirror for a long time, adjusting my cufflinks even though I wasn't wearing the jacket yet. I thought about how many times Alina had said she couldn't wait to build an empire with me, how she'd asked deep questions about my business during our third date. At the time, I thought she was being curious. Now I know she was casing the vault. Her empire wasn't something we were going to build together. She wanted to inherit it, strip it, sell it. I picked up the tux jacket. It still had the tag on it. I'd gotten it tailored weeks ago. I ran my fingers over the inside pocket. There, folded, was the USB. Just one file. A 6-minute video. It held everything in. Her messages to Grayson, the photos, the emails, the love notes. Her voice and audio clips, laughing about how clueless I was. It was all ready to play. And in exactly 45 minutes, every person she knew would see it. There was a knock. 5 minutes, the wedding planner chirped from outside. I didn't respond. I just slipped the USB back into my pocket, closed the jacket, and opened the door. I walked out with a calm that felt foreign, like I was borrowing someone else's body. The music began. Soft violins. The kind that makes people tear up even if they don't know the bride. I stood at the altar beside the officiant, who smiled at me like everything was normal. Behind him, the breeze caught the curtains on the gazebo, making them flutter like wings. Then the guest stood. And there she was. Alina. She looked stunning. Perfect white gown, pearls, hairpin just right. She smiled as she walked, her eyes locked on mine, like she was floating. If I hadn't seen the evidence, I would have believed her. That's what haunted me most, how real she looked while being so fake. Her father beamed beside her, proud as any father could be. He didn't know his daughter was leading me to slaughter. The violin music swelled. Petals danced across the aisle. Alina reached the steps of the altar, and her father handed her off to me like I was being given a treasure. Take care of her, he whispered. I nodded. But in my chest, I felt nothing but the deep, rumbling quiet of a man who's reached the end of his patience. We turned toward the officiant. Dearly beloved, he began. I didn't hear much after that. The words washed over me. The part about love, about honor, about forever. The guest sat again. Alina held my hand like she meant it. I watched her, watched how convincing she was. She'd even mastered the soft squeeze on my palm when something sweet was said, like she knew when to time her affection. I studied her the way you study a stranger trying to sell you a stolen painting. When the officiant asked if there were any objections, I held my breath. Of course, no one spoke. Why would they? They were still asleep. Then came the vows. Hers first. Alina stepped forward with her custom-written words, smiling like this was the happiest day of her life. Logan, she began. I never believed in fate until I met you. You taught me what loyalty means, what strength looks like. You're the kind of man who gives everything, your heart, your time, your dreams. And I promise, today and every day, to match your love with my own. The guests melted. Her mother dabbed her eyes. The bridesmaids clutched tissues. I felt like I was watching a Broadway performance. She even paused at the right moments, her voice trembling just slightly. Perfect delivery. Now it was my turn. I took a long breath and stepped up, but I didn't take out the piece of paper I'd written my vows on. Instead, I said, before I say anything else, I'd like to share something. Something honest. Something real. The officiant blinked. Of course. I turned toward Miles, standing at the side of the garden behind a speaker stand. He saw the signal. One nod. Then it happened. The music cut out. The screen, which was meant to show a slideshow of our engagement photos during the reception, flickered to life right behind the altar. The first photo was of Alina and Grayson on the beach, holding hands. There were gasps. Her father turned. Her mother leaned forward in confusion. Alina stiffened beside me, her hand dropping from mine. The second image was them in a hotel room, kissing. Now the murmurs turned into whispers. Faces turned toward her, confused, then shocked, then disgusted. Then the video rolled. Audio. Her voice. Once I'm his wife, we'll take what we need and be done. He's too sweet to ever suspect anything. People started standing up. A few looked at me, trying to read my expression. I kept my face still. Cold. The way hers had been when she plotted this. Alina spun toward me, pale, trembling. Logan, what is this? I didn't answer. The evidence did the talking. For a long moment, no one moved. Not a single person spoke. The soft breeze rustling through the garden was the only sound left after the audio clip finished. That voice, her voice, still echoed in the silence, venom dressed in silk. He's too sweet to ever suspect anything. Then came the collapse. Alina's smile had vanished completely. The confident bride that walked toward me just minutes ago was now breathing unevenly, her eyes darting across the guests, searching for something solid to hold on to. But nothing came. Not from her father, not from her friends, not even from the bridesmaids, who now stared at her like they didn't know her at all. I stepped away from her. Slowly. Intentionally. That's when the whispers began to rise, like an approaching storm. What is this? Is that real? Oh my God. Alina tried to speak, but her lips moved without sound. She reached out for me, her fingers brushing the sleeve of my jacket. I took another step back. You planned it, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, but calm. My voice didn't shake. You planned everything. The marriage, the company, my life. It was all just a setup to steal and leave. No, she gasped, her voice cracking. It's not what it looks like. Logan, please, you have to let me explain. I looked at her, really looked at her. The expensive dress, the perfect makeup, the trembling lip. Everything crafted to make her the center of attention. It was working, but not the way she'd hoped. You want to explain? I asked. Explain the emails? The photos? The letters? The ones where you promised to take my house, my business, and then divorce me like it was some kind of game. Her mouth opened, then shut. Her father finally stood. Alina, he said, his voice low and tight. Is this true? She didn't answer him either. Someone behind us swore under their breath. A woman gasped. The screen behind us flickered again, now showing a time-stamped message from 2 weeks ago, where she had written to Grayson, he's transferring ownership of the property next week. All I have to do is sign. People were now standing. Some guests started walking out. One of the bridesmaids turned away, clutching her stomach. Another woman asked. A joke. I repeated. You printed love letters to your ex and stored them in our home. You scheduled meetings with him behind my back. You bragged about how easily I trusted you. That's not a joke. That's betrayal with a blueprint. Her expression crumbled. She started crying, messy, gulping sobs that probably would have softened me a year ago. But not now. Not after everything. Not after the way she smiled in those photos with him. Not after the way she described me in those emails. Predictable, soft, easy to control. She dropped to her knees. Logan, please. I was wrong. I didn't go through with it, okay? I changed. I chose you. No, I said quietly. You chose to get caught. There were no more violins playing. No one was smiling. Even the officiant had stepped away, his hands shaking as he removed the small microphone clipped to his collar. Then I turned to face the crowd. My apologies for the interruption, I said. I know many of you came here expecting a wedding. But this isn't a wedding. This was going to be a crime scene. And I couldn't let it happen. I didn't need to raise my voice. Every word landed with weight, because people could see I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished. Some of you may have questions, I continued. There will be time for that. But for now, just know this. I won't be marrying Alina. Not today. Not ever. And with that, I stepped down from the altar. Alina cried louder behind me. I didn't look back. Miles was waiting just beyond the trees. I handed him the USB. Get this to my lawyer, I said. He'll know what to do. He nodded. You sure you're okay? I took a breath. No, I said honestly. But I will be. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Grayson. A message. You made your move. Let's see if you can handle mine. I stared at it, then hit forward and sent it to my lawyer as well. Let them try something now. I had everything backed up. I'd already revoked her access to my accounts, changed the locks, cleared the legal path. They'd planned to take everything, but now they had nothing but shame. I walked around the side of the garden to avoid the main crowd. I didn't want pity. I didn't want attention. I just wanted distance. But as I passed one group of guests, I heard someone say he handled it like a man. Someone else added, she had us all fooled. I kept walking. By the time I reached the gate, the limo that was meant to take us to the reception was still parked. The driver opened the door automatically, assuming we were on schedule. I shook my head. There's been a change of plans, I said. He blinked. Should I still drive you to the hotel? No, I said, pulling out my phone. I'll be going somewhere else. I booked a flight right there on the spot. I didn't care where, just somewhere far enough to think. I picked a small coastal town I'd always heard about but never visited. A place with no history, no reminders. I stood by the curb as the guests slowly began to exit, their chatter filled with confusion, sympathy, and shock. A few looked my way. Some nodded. Others kept their heads down. But not her. Alina was still at the altar, on her knees, surrounded by everything she built on lies. And now left with nothing. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I just walked toward the waiting car, one step at a time, each footfall feeling lighter than the one before. Because when everything collapses, there's one small mercy. You get to decide what rises from the ashes. And I was already planning my rebuild. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not my parents. Not my business partner. Not even Miles. He'd done enough, and I owed him peace more than explanations. All I said was that I needed air. Space. A stretch of silence where no one would call my name or ask, "Are you okay?" Because the truth was, I didn't know what okay looked like anymore. I booked a one-way ticket to a quiet town on the northern coast, a place called Belridge. I'd never been there before. Didn't know anyone who lived there. That was the point. I didn't want to hear familiar voices or see familiar streets. I wanted clean air, clean skies, and a place where my name meant nothing to anyone. The plane ride felt like being in limbo. I stared out the window as the clouds rolled by, thinking about nothing and everything all at once. My body was there, upright, breathing, but my mind was still standing under that white archway, watching her cry on the floor in a dress she picked to trick the world. When I landed, I rented a car that smelled faintly like seaweed and lemon-scented wipes. The drive from the airport to the little cottage I'd booked was nearly 2 hours. The roads curved through forest and coastline, the kind of landscape that looked like it had never been touched by betrayal. It felt like I'd crossed into another world, one that didn't care about weddings or liars or love notes written to exes. The cottage was small, old, and beautiful in a quiet way. White shutters, a creaky porch, and a rusted mailbox that leaned a little to the left. I liked it instantly. The owner left a key under a flower pot and a handwritten note. "Logan, hope you find peace here." Maggie. Peace. That was a word I hadn't touched in a while. Not since the late-night arguments disguised as discussions, not since I started noticing how often Alina would take phone calls outside or clear her browser history like she was tidying up her secrets. I stepped inside and dropped my bag. The cottage smelled like lavender and dust, and I let myself collapse onto the couch without even unpacking. I didn't cry. Still hadn't cried since it all came crashing down. Not because I was holding it in, but because everything inside me had gone quiet. Numb. My emotions were like distant echoes bouncing through an empty house. The first 3 days passed in silence. I turned off my phone, didn't check emails, didn't open the news. I woke up, walked the beach, made simple food, and slept. That was it. No distractions. No people. Just me and the echoes. I found myself staring at the waves a lot. There was something honest about them. They came and went, again and again, never hiding who they were. The ocean never pretended to love you while planning to sink you. It didn't whisper sweet lies or smile while stealing everything you had. It just was. On the 4th day, I sat on a wooden bench overlooking the cliffs. The wind was cold, but not cruel. I had a notebook in my lap and a pen in hand. For the first time since that day, I started to write. Not a letter to her. Not a plan for revenge. Just thoughts. Fragments. Memories. I wrote about the first time I saw her. The night we danced in the rain. The time I almost proposed too early and had to shove the ring back in my pocket. I wrote about the signs I ignored. The way she flinched when I talked about shared bank accounts. The way she always insisted on prenups, but disguised them as just being responsible. Then I wrote about Miles. About the moment he sent the message. How it saved my life without me realizing it at the time. He gave me the key before I even knew I was locked in a cage. I filled 5 pages before I stopped. That night, I slept for 8 hours straight. No dreams. No jolts. Just sleep. The next morning, I finally checked my phone. 137 missed calls. 84 texts. The first dozen were from Alina. The rest were scattered between her friends, her mother, and a few distant relatives I hadn't seen since college. They ranged from pleading, "Please talk to her," to scolding, "You humiliated her in front of everyone," to outright threatening, "She's going to sue you for defamation." But I didn't reply. There was one message that caught my eye, though. It was from a name I hadn't expected. "Grayson, you think you're smart, don't you? You think exposing her ruined us? You just lit the first fire. Be ready for what comes next. I read it twice, then a third time, and I smiled for the first time in days. Because that message told me one very important thing. He wasn't in control anymore. He thought I would hide, cry, beg. But I wasn't broken. I was awake. I replied only 3 words. See you soon. Then I blocked his number. That afternoon, I drove into Belridge's small town center. Bought a new phone under a different number. Signed up for a local gym. Walked into a bookstore and asked about job listings on the board out front. The woman behind the counter looked surprised. You're not from around here, are you? She asked. No, I said. Just starting over. She smiled. Well, we could use more of that. I walked out feeling lighter. Like something invisible had been unhooked from my shoulders. That night, I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea, and watching the stars. The world had tried to erase me. She had tried to rewrite me into a victim. But I wasn't a footnote in her story. I was writing a new one. And this time, no one else held the pen. I used to think silence was something you endured, something you filled with music, noise, distractions. But that was before Belridge. Before the lies crumbled. Before the mask came off the woman I thought I knew. Now, silence had taken on a new shape. It wasn't hollow anymore. It was full, thick, like standing in a forest after snowfall, quiet, but alive. Each morning, I woke up to birds instead of notifications. No alarms. No agenda. I made black coffee in a chipped mug and sat on the porch, watching the sun cut across the tree line. It was a different rhythm, one I hadn't realized I needed. For once, no one was trying to take something from me. There were no games to decode, no smiles with sharp edges. Just time. And for the first time in a long time, it was mine alone. I started fixing up the cottage, not out of necessity, but out of instinct. The back steps were warped and creaky, so I replaced the planks. The porch light had water damage. I rewired it, sealed the base, added a brighter bulb. There was something healing about working with my hands again, building something honest. In the city, my hands were always busy signing deals, shaking hands, typing numbers into spreadsheets. But here, my hands were working with tools, with splinters, with rusted screws and old nails. It grounded me. One afternoon, while sanding down a crooked kitchen cabinet door, I caught myself humming. I stopped mid-note, surprised by the sound. It was the first time I'd made noise without thinking. Not out of pain, not out of frustration, just a simple melody, rising without invitation. That night, I lit a fire in the small brick pit behind the cottage. The air was crisp. The stars above Belridge looked brighter than anything back home. I sat there watching the flames, thinking about everything I'd lost and everything I'd dodged. She would have ruined me. I don't mean financially. Money can be made again. Property can be replaced. But she would have ruined my belief in people, my sense of peace, my ability to trust without fear. If I hadn't opened that closet, if Miles hadn't warned me, I would have married someone who looked me in the eye while lying straight through her teeth. Sometimes that thought hit me like a wave. How close I'd come to building a life on rotten soil. One morning, about 3 weeks after I arrived in Belridge, I got a call from an unknown number. I normally wouldn't have answered, but something nudged me to pick up. Hello. A pause. Then a quiet voice. Logan, it's me. It was her. Alina. My grip tightened around the phone. My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat, but I could feel a tension stretch across my shoulders like a taut wire. What do you want? I asked, calmly. I just need to talk. Please. Just a few minutes. I haven't heard from you. I didn't know where you were. I was scared. Scared. I almost laughed. That's rich, coming from you. I deserve that, she said quickly. I do. I'm not calling to defend what I did. I'm not. I've lost everything, Logan. Everyone's turned their back on me. My parents won't speak to me. I've been getting threats online. I don't even know if I can show my face in the city again. I let the silence stretch. She filled it like I knew she would. I made a mistake, she said, voice trembling. I thought I could. I thought I could have both. The comfort of what you offered and the thrill of something else. I was stupid, but I never meant to actually hurt you. I swear to God. Stop. I cut in. Don't use the tone with me. Don't cry. Don't make this another performance. She fell silent. I'm not the man you fooled before. I'm not the version of myself that needed your approval or your affection or your lies dressed as promises. That man's gone. You buried him in that closet with those pictures. Her breathing hitched on the line. I don't expect forgiveness, she whispered. I needed to hear your voice. I paused, then said, you don't get that anymore. And I hung up. No drama. No explosion. Just an ending. I sat in the silence afterward. A new kind of silence. Not the stunned kind that follows betrayal, but the clean kind that comes with closure. That day, I drove into town and applied for a part-time job at a hardware store. The owner, a tall woman with gray hair and a name tag that said Ruthie, interviewed me on the spot. You ever worked retail? She asked. No, I admitted. But I've run a company, built houses, designed office spaces, and I know how to talk to people. She tilted her head. Why are you here? Because I need to be somewhere where nobody expects anything from me, I said. Except maybe that I show up and do a good job. She nodded once. Can you lift a 40-pound bag of concrete? I smiled. Try me. She hired me that afternoon. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't high-paying. But it was simple, honest, and every shift felt like medicine. I started to become part of the town in small, invisible ways. The barista at the corner cafe remembered my order. The older man at the bait shop waved every morning. People didn't ask me who I was or where I'd come from. They just let me be. One evening, while closing up the shop, Ruthie turned to me and said, you look different than the day you walked in. How so? Less like you're running, she said, wiping her hands on a rag. More like you've arrived. That night, I walked along the beach with my shoes off, the tide licking at my feet. The stars were out again, and the wind was cool against my face. I wasn't healed, not completely. Some wounds take longer than others, but I was quiet inside. Still, no more racing thoughts. No more pretending. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a man trying to fix what was broken. I felt like a man building something new. There's something strange about watching yourself come back to life. It doesn't happen all at once, like a movie character getting some big revelation. No, it's slow, subtle. A look in the mirror where your eyes aren't so hollow. A laugh that escapes your mouth without permission. A feeling, just for a moment, that maybe, just maybe, you'll be okay. It was early one morning, and I stood in front of the fogged-up mirror in the cottage bathroom. I had just stepped out of the shower, a towel around my waist, steam rising around me. I wiped the mirror with my palm and froze. I didn't recognize the man staring back. Not because he looked different, but because he looked real. Gone was the polished, ever-smiling groom-to-be. Gone was the man with the 5-point business plan and the eager-to-please grin. This man had stubble on his jaw and eyes that had seen betrayal and stood back up anyway. This man wasn't broken, he was rebuilt. And yet, a part of me felt like I was looking at a ghost. Not hers, mine. The version of me that had let love blind him. The man who thought planning a future meant security. That if you gave enough, loved enough, sacrificed enough, you could hold on to someone. The truth was, I hadn't lost her. I'd lost who I thought I was with her. That was the hardest thing to accept. After drying off, I got dressed and made my usual cup of coffee. Strong, no cream. Outside, the wind rolled through the trees like a slow tide, and I stepped onto the porch with the mug in hand, letting the heat soak into my palms. My phone buzzed inside. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something told me to check. A name flashed across the screen I hadn't seen in a while. Jonas. Old friend. Business associate. He was one of the first people I called when I got the keys to my company's office space years ago. A solid guy, no nonsense, sharp with numbers, but sharper with people. If Miles was the brother who saved my heart, Jonas was the one who washed my back professionally. I answered. Logan, he said, like my name had been sitting on his tongue for days. I wasn't sure if you'd pick up. It's good to hear your voice, I replied, surprised to realize I meant it. Listen, man, I know what happened. Well, I know what I saw, and what's been going around. I waited. You humiliated her, he said, but you did it with receipts. I didn't do it to hurt her, I said. I did it to stop her. I know, he said. That's why I'm calling. You might want to sit down for this. I walked back into the house and sat at the kitchen table. She tried to sue you. I didn't even blink. Of course she did. Tried to claim emotional damages, breach of privacy, intentional infliction of, whatever she could throw at a wall. And your lawyer shut it down in one hearing. You were covered. The judge threw it out before lunch. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. But here's the thing, Logan. That Grayson guy? He's not letting it go. He's trying to circle back, legally and publicly. Blog posts, videos. He's got an angle. Let him. I said. Jonas paused. You're not worried? Jonas, I was almost married to a woman who called me a stepping stone in writing. If someone wants to post about me now, go ahead. I've got nothing to hide. All right, he said slowly. But that's not the only reason I called. I waited. I've got a new venture. Real estate tech. And I want you on it. That caught me off guard. Why me? Because no one builds like you do. And because you're the only one I know who's come back from hell with a blueprint. I didn't respond right away. I looked out the window, past the trees, past the mist curling through the branches, and felt something shift in my chest. I'm not sure I'm ready, I said. Maybe not, he said. But when you are, the offer stands. Just say the word. We hung up shortly after, and I sat there, tapping the side of my mug, letting the ideas settle in my mind like fresh paint on drywall. A new beginning. One on my terms. That afternoon, I took a walk into town. I passed the bookstore, waved to Ruthie at the hardware store, and found myself in front of an old barber shop with a cracked sign and a red and white pole that still spun in lazy circles. I stepped inside on a whim. The place smelled like talc and old wood. A man in his 60s sat behind the counter reading a newspaper. He looked up, nodded. Cut or just passing through? I sat in the chair. A little of both. He chuckled. New guy in town, right? The quiet one with the haunted eyes. I guess that's me, I said. As he clipped away at my hair, he talked. About fishing. About local politics. About nothing important, and it was everything I needed. Simple conversation. No assumptions. No questions about weddings or betrayals. Just a man getting a haircut from another man who didn't care what I had or hadn't lost. When I left, I looked different. Sharper. Lighter. I didn't realize how much weight I'd been carrying in my reflection. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again. And this time, It had been over a month since I'd disappeared. The days in Belridge had grown longer, the wind cooler. Autumn was quietly slipping into the edges of the town, orange leaves dancing across the road, the scent of smoke drifting from chimneys, shops putting out rustic decor like time itself was trying to soften the air. And I was changing with the season. Not fast, but surely. Until the past came knocking. It was a Wednesday. Quiet, like most days in Belridge. I had just finished my shift at the hardware store and picked up a loaf of warm bread from the bakery next door. I liked how life worked here, clean exchanges, familiar faces, nobody trying to trick you out of anything. The sun was dipping low when I reached the cottage. I was locking up my car when I saw her. Alina, standing by the porch. She wasn't dressed in white this time. No bridal fantasy, no elegant makeup, no diamond earrings to distract from the truth. She wore a dark sweater, jeans, and eyes swollen from crying. Still, I froze. For a second, the sound of leaves in the wind disappeared. All I could hear was my own breath, and my grip on the paper bag of bread tightening. What are you doing here? I asked. My voice was flat. Cold. Not cruel, just controlled. She took a step forward, but I didn't move. I didn't know where else to go, she said. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd practiced what to say 100 times before today. That's funny, I replied, climbing the porch slowly. You always seem to know what to do before. Didn't need directions then. I know I don't deserve this, she said quickly. I know I should have never come. But I'm not here to manipulate you, Logan. I swear. I'm not here for money, or the house, or the company. I crossed my arms. Then why? She swallowed. Because I wanted you to hear the truth from me. Not from lawyers. Not from texts. Just from me. I leaned against the porch rail and said nothing. She took that as permission. I know what I did was unforgivable. I know I planned something sick, selfish, and cruel. At first, it started as a joke with Grayson. He hated seeing me settle down, said I was wasting my beauty. I told him you were sweet, stable, easy. He laughed and said I could use that. And the stupid part is, I let that thought in. I let it grow. I stared at her. She didn't look away this time. I wanted security, she said. I wanted your loyalty, your steadiness, the life you built. But I also wanted the thrill of something dangerous, something wild. And I lied to myself that I could have both without destroying anything. You didn't just destroy something, I said finally. You tried to rewrite my whole life. You looked me in the eyes and planned a future where I was disposable. You wanted my last name but not my soul. She winced. I know. I shook my head. No, you don't. You don't know what it's like to open a closet and find your future ripped apart like an old receipt. You don't know what it's like to listen to your fiancé say you're easy to control and mean it. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears filling her eyes. You don't know what it's like, I continued, to stand at an altar and pretend for the sake of everyone else, just long enough to expose the lie in front of them. You don't know what it costs someone to not scream when everything they believed turns to ash. Her legs gave out, and she sat on the porch steps. I've lost everything, she whispered. My reputation, my parents, my job. Grayson left me 2 days after the wedding collapsed. Said I was a liability. Told me I wasn't worth the mess. I raised an eyebrow. But you were ready to throw your life away for him. I was stupid. No, I corrected. You were entitled. Selfish. You thought because I loved you, I'd never see the truth. She wiped her eyes. I came here because I needed you to know. I'm not that woman anymore. I sat down on the other end of the porch, keeping distance. I don't hate you, I said. That made her pause. You don't. I did. For a moment. But hate takes energy. Energy I'm using to rebuild myself. I'm not here in this town trying to get revenge, Alina. I'm here trying to find the parts of myself you nearly erased. She nodded slowly. I can't ask you to forgive me. I don't expect a second chance. Good, I said, because I'm not offering one. The words weren't sharp. They were final. And she knew it. I don't love you, I added, my voice softer. Not anymore. But I did. And I think some small part of me always will, if only for who I thought you were. That broke her. The tears came fast, uncontrollably. She pulled her knees to her chest and sobbed into her sleeves. I let her cry. I didn't comfort her. I wasn't her rescuer anymore. When the crying slowed, she asked, Do you want me to leave? I think you already know the answer. She nodded. She stood, shaky on her feet. Thank you, she said, for listening, even if I didn't deserve it. Then she walked down the steps, her silhouette shrinking as she moved toward the road. I didn't watch her go. I walked inside, set the bread on the counter, and lit the fire in the fireplace. The room filled with a soft glow, and I sat on the couch, feeling something I hadn't in weeks. Closure. The past didn't knock down the door. It came, confessed, and left, and I didn't fall apart. The morning after Alina left Belridge, something shifted inside me. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way. There was no triumphant music, no fist in the air, no tears streaming down my face as I declared my rebirth. It wasn't loud like that. It was quiet, subtle, like waking up after a long, feverish dream and realizing you don't feel sick anymore. I stood by the window of the cottage, watching the mist roll across the trees. There was no lingering rage, no bitterness coating my tongue, just stillness. For the first time in months, I felt like I was standing in my own skin again, not trying to escape it, not carrying the weight of shame that didn't even belong to me. I boiled water for coffee, watching the kettle hum on the stove. When it whistled, it sounded softer than usual, like even the appliances in this town had learned to speak gently. I poured the water, stirred it slowly, then stepped outside with my mug and sat on the porch that I had repaired with my own hands. It wasn't just wood and nails anymore. It was proof that I had built something honest, that I was still capable of creating, not just surviving. I thought about the last thing I'd said to her. I don't love you anymore. But I did. It was true. There was no venom behind it. Just truth. And truth, when it comes clean, carries peace in its pocket. A few days later, Ruthie at the hardware store asked me if I could help redesign a new layout for the back storage room. Said the shelves were too high, the flow too awkward. I offered to draw up a sketch, and she looked at me sideways. You an architect or something? She asked. Something like that, I said. That evening, I pulled out my old sketch pad, one I hadn't touched since I left the city. It had dust on it, like it had been asleep too. I opened it slowly, felt the weight of it in my hands, and turned to a blank page. Then I began to draw. Not blueprints for buildings or offices like before, but something else. A space for warmth, light, balance, a mix of wood and glass. A retreat, maybe. Something people could walk into and feel whole again. Like I was trying to capture what Belridge had done for me and translate it into walls and windows. I lost track of time sketching. When I looked up, the sky outside had turned indigo, and the stars had come out like shy guests at a party. I closed the book, and for the first time since everything collapsed, I realized what I wanted to do next. I didn't want to go back to who I was. That man built empires but neglected the cracks. That man gave everything away for the illusion of love. I wanted to build something different now. Something real. The next day, I emailed Jonas. Told him I wasn't ready to return to the business world he knew. But I was ready to design again. Only this time, I wanted to work on spaces that mattered, homes, shelters, retreat centers, buildings that healed people instead of impressing investors. He replied the same day, "Whatever you need, Logan. I'll back it. No questions asked." That message meant more to me than I could say. Later that week, I found a small piece of land just outside Belridge. Nothing fancy, just a gentle slope of grass surrounded by trees, with the scent of pine thick in the air. It was for sale, and the sign had been weathered by years of neglect. I called the number, met with the owner, and signed the papers by the end of the week. It wasn't just land. It was possibility. The idea came to life like a spark catching dry leaves. I would design and build a wellness retreat, simple cabins, communal spaces, gardens, a place people could come when the world had broken them open and they didn't know where to go. A place for people like me. Not a hotel, not a clinic, a sanctuary. I named it Stillhouse, because sometimes peace isn't about movement. It's about stillness. The blueprint took shape over the following days. I spread my designs across the cottage table, pages and pages of angles and sketches and ideas. I added details at night, tweaking window heights and door placements like a man carving himself out of wood and memory. Ruthie offered to help spread the word. So did the baker, the woman at the bookstore, even the quiet fisherman who lived up the hill. In Belridge, people didn't ask what you'd done. They looked at who you were becoming. Jonas wired the seed money in 2 days. I started clearing the land myself, hammer in hand, sweat on my back. Every plank I placed felt like a brick in the foundation of a new life. And then, one morning, something happened I didn't expect. I laughed. A real, full laugh. I was trying to screw in a crooked window frame, cursing under my breath, when the whole panel fell forward and smacked me in the chest. I stumbled back, nearly landing in a pile of insulation foam, and for some reason, I just lost it. Not in frustration. In amusement. It felt good. Foreign, but good. I stood there, hand over my chest, laughing alone in the frame of a cabin I'd built with my own hands. And I thought, this is it. This is what healing looks like. Not dramatic speeches or courtroom victories. Just moments where your soul peeks out again and says, I'm still here. That night, I sat on the porch again. Stars overhead. Sketchpad beside me. I wasn't waiting for anyone to show up. I wasn't afraid of anyone coming back. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone. I just was Logan. The man who didn't break. The man who built peace from ashes. It had been almost 6 months since I disappeared from the city. 6 months since I stood at the altar with a smile that masked a truth I had already uncovered. Since I watched the woman I was supposed to marry unravel before everyone she tried to impress. Since I turned my back on the wreckage and walked towards something that didn't yet have a name. Now, as I stood at the edge of the newly cleared land, the sun rising behind the trees like a slow drumbeat, I knew exactly what I'd walked toward. Me. The real me. Stillhouse was taking shape. 3 cabins were already framed. The communal hall was halfway done. There were piles of lumber where benches would be, outlines of gardens in the dirt, future trails sketched in white chalk on tree bark. Nothing was perfect yet, but that was the beauty of it. It didn't need to be. People in town had begun to stop calling me the new guy and just called me Logan. Sometimes they'd drive past the site and honk. Others dropped off snacks, nails, even paint samples. Belridge had wrapped its arms around me without asking what I did, what I lost, or what I ran from. It only asked who I wanted to be next. And that meant everything. Jonas came to visit one weekend. He pulled up in a rental car, stepped out in loafers that immediately sank into the muddy soil, and said, Jesus, man, you really traded concrete for compost. I laughed. Welcome to Belridge. He looked around the site like a man seeing something sacred for the first time. This is different, but it suits you. I handed him a coffee and nodded toward the lake in the distance. I'm not the same guy you used to work with. No, he said, sipping. You're better. We talked business later, but it was easy, natural. No suits, no boardrooms, just plans on a porch with coffee and pencil sketches. He agreed to help bring in a few sponsors, nothing flashy. Just enough to get Stillhouse off the ground. Before he left, he paused at the car and looked back at me. You ever plan to come back to the city? I shook my head. I'm already home. He smiled. Then I'll come back with hiking boots next time. After he drove off, I sat on the hill and watched the way the light moved over the frame of the retreat's main hall. I imagined it filled with people one day, people recovering from their own heartbreaks. their own disasters, sitting in quiet together, finding parts of themselves again. I wasn't just building a retreat. I was building a future I believed in. The past tried to write me as a fool, as a footnote in someone else's fairy tale. But in the end, I'd rewritten it all. With wood, with stone, with silence and sweat. And then, one Sunday morning, while planting young lavender near the path to the cabins, I saw her. Not Alina. Someone else. She wore a gray hoodie, jeans, and had a book tucked under her arm. She looked maybe mid-30s, hair tied back in a messy braid. She paused near the edge of the property, reading the hand-carved sign that said, "Stillhouse, a place to begin again." I stood and dusted my hands off. "Can I help you?" She smiled, tentative. "I'm sorry, I saw the sign from the road. Is this a clinic?" "Not exactly," I said. "It's a retreat, a quiet space, for people figuring things out." Her eyes softened. "Sounds like something the world needs." I nodded. "That's the idea." She extended a hand. "I'm Rowan. Logan." We shook. She glanced at the open frames of the cabins, the wheelbarrow, the scattered tools. "Looks like you've been busy." "You could say that." She hesitated, then smiled again. "If you ever need help with the garden." "I'm not bad with a shovel." I grinned. "Well then, Rowan, grab a pair of gloves." She came back the next morning with gardening gloves and lemon muffins. Over time, she became a fixture. Quiet, kind, never asked questions that felt like digging. She helped me plant, paint, arrange stone pathways. And slowly, without realizing it, we started having conversations that mattered. About grief, about loss, about starting over. One evening, we sat under the string lights I had hung between two pine trees. The fire pit was crackling. She sipped tea while I watched the sparks rise. "You talk about the man you used to be like he's dead," she said softly. "He is," I replied. She looked at me carefully. "I don't think he died. I think he evolved." I considered that. Maybe she was right. Maybe I hadn't lost myself. Maybe I'd just grown into someone truer. Later that night, alone in the cottage, I opened the drawer beside my bed and pulled out the last thing I hadn't thrown away, a printed copy of the email Alina once wrote. The one that said, "Once I'm his wife, we'll take what we can and leave." I stared at it for a long while. Not with pain. Not even with anger. Just acceptance. Then I folded it neatly, walked outside, and threw it into the fire. It curled in the flames, blackened, turned to ash, and with it, so did the last thread tying me to the man who almost let love destroy him. When the flames faded, I stood under the stars and whispered to no one. I came back. Not to the city. Not to the relationship. Not to the company. But to myself. Logan, the man they tried to erase. The man who rebuilt everything they thought they'd taken. Stillhouse would open by spring. And when it did, people would come. Wounded. Lost. Tired. Just like I once was. And I'd be here to greet them. Not as a victim. Not as a ghost. But as the man who came back stronger. Wiser. Whole.